Kid Kyuubi. Kurama, the nine-tailed fox, was mad. Scratch that, he was furious. For the first time in nearly a century, he was finally free from his prison, only to have his mind taken over by that thrice-cursed Sharingan again. Seriously, if he hadn't been controlled a few minutes ago, he'd hightail it out of the village he found himself in. But now he would just destroy it to relieve some built-up stress he accumulated over the years. Then, to add the icing on top of the cake, he found himself battling the leader of said village, who also happened to be his last host's mate, and the infuriating blonde wasn't going easy on him. It was clear that Minato Namikaze was on a whole different league to the ants he had been swatting aside for the past half hour. The fourth Hokage had even summoned the Toad Boss in order to battle him, and was able to redirect his most powerful attack, the Tailed Beast Bomb, like it was nothing. If he was in his right mind and wasn't so ticked off, Kurama might have actually been impressed by the human's power. As Kurama battled the blonde human, he thought back onto where it all went wrong in his life. It all started a few years after the Sage of the Six Paths died. After his death, almost no people saw the Biju as sentient creatures, just as beasts and weapons to use as they constantly battled each other in a never-ending war. One by one, he and his siblings started to lose faith in humanity, as well as in the prophecy that their father gave them, that a single human would be able to earn their trust and bring peace to the world. Then, close to a century ago, everything really went down the crapper. A human, probably the most infuriating human alive, named Madara Uchiha, came to his territory and was able to gain control of his mind using his Sharingan. The tailed beast had never felt so humiliated and violated in his entire life. Not even when those accursed gold and silver brothers from the hidden cloud had tried to take his power. He still got a stomach ache every time he thought of those two. That a-hole Madara had used him to battle an almost equally infuriating human, Hashirama Senju. The battle was long and fierce, but the first Hokage was eventually victorious, causing the Uchiha to flee. However, before Kurama could fully regain his freedom, the first had used his immense powers to subdue him, while the man's wife, an Uzumaki named Mito, had sealed him inside herself, the two of them saying that his power was too great and destructive to be allowed to roam free. Who were they to judge that? It made it even worse that they were all descended from the same line as the old man, which was like rubbing salt on the wounds. Then, as Mito's life drew to a close years later, Kurama found himself being sealed inside a brat of a little girl. Seriously, any kid that hyper needed to have their heads examined. She was also an Uzumaki named Kushina, and she just treated him like he was just a beast that needed to be locked up. Oh, how that burned him up. A few years later, it looked like he had a chance at freedom. Kushina was to have a child and, due to the seal weakening during childbirth, Kurama did everything he could to escape. Unfortunately, the fourth Hokage Minato Namikaze happened to be the infant's father and, due to his skills in sealing that his wife had taught him, he was able to keep the seal stable during the birth. Suddenly, a masked man broke into the hidden location the birthing was taking place, killing the ANBU guards and holding the newborn brat hostage. Minato was able to teleport himself and the brat to safety, leaving Kushina alone with the masked man. Suddenly, the Kyuubi found himself looking into a Sharingan eye that the man possessed hidden by his mask. Kurama found his control over his own body fading as he was ripped out of his host, and found himself being summoned to attack the hidden leaf village. The fox could see himself attacking the village, slaughtering the annoying ants called shinobi by the hundreds. Suddenly, he found himself in control of his body again. But at this point he was too enraged to care due to the shinobi of the village constantly attacking him. Slowly but surely the Biju found himself being pushed outside of the village. Kurama prepared to fire another tailed beast bomb at the surrounding warriors, but suddenly found that the boss toad was being dropped right on top of him. This led to his current predicament. As he prepared to kill the overgrown tadpole, Kurama suddenly felt himself transported a safe distance away from the leaf village. Before he could react or flee, the tailed beast found himself wrapped up in his previous host's chakra chains, unable to move an inch. Kurama noticed movement beneath him and saw two of the people responsible for his current predicament, that blonde idiot and his previous host. Before he could make a move to free himself, he noticed the man performing hand signs when suddenly, He saw the spectral form of the Reaper rise up behind the fourth, and it plunged its hand into the man. The hand went straight through the human and latched onto the nine-tailed fox. "Curse you, fourth Hokage," Kurama thought as he realized what the ninja had planned. They planned on sealing him away again, and he would be imprisoned again so soon after being free. No, he couldn't allow that. The Kyuubi suddenly felt immense pain as half of his chakra was forcibly ripped from his body and into the Reaper's stomach along with the man's soul. He felt himself shrinking as his powers diminished slightly. However, he noticed something else was wrong with him. Before Kurama could further dwell on what was wrong with him, he noticed Minato summoned a ceremonial pedestal and placed his newborn son on it. Does he mean to seal me away again, in that child? Kurama thought. He then noticed the chains binding him started to become slack as Kushina's strength faded and, acting on pure desperation, plunged his large clawed head at the child, thinking that if the baby was destroyed he wouldn't be sealed. To his surprise, the two parents jumped in front of his claw and stopped it with their own bodies before it could reach the baby. "Curse you both!" Kyuubi growled out, before he saw Namikaze giving the key to the new seal to a summoned toad before completing another set of hand seals. As he was being drawn into the seal on the infant, he noticed the Reaper swallowing the last few traces of his chakra and Minato's soul. Shortly after arriving in his new prison, which he noticed looked like a jail mixed with a sewer system, he felt a stabbing pain in his head and noticed his body was still shrinking. To his growing horror, Kurama found it harder and harder to remember certain aspects of his life. It was then he realized when the Reaper sealed away half his chakra, he must have also sealed away a portion of his memories. Before he blacked out Kurama, the nine-tailed fox and strongest of the tailed beasts managed to growl out, "See, curse it all!" And then he went into a deep slumber, one he wouldn't wake up from for a few years. What neither Kurama nor the people who sealed him realized was that, by sealing part of his chakra and a portion of his memories away, it caused the tailed beast to revert back to his childhood in both mind and body. Only 10 minutes after he blacked out, Kurama had shrunk from his imposing form into a fluffy little fox kit, barely the size of a full-grown Inuzuka dog. No one knew it yet, but events from this night would forever change the life of the Biju known as Kurama and the life of his host, a boy named Naruto Uzumaki. Time skip 4 years. Kurama awoke with a start. Where am I?" the fox kit stuttered out. The last thing he remembered was the old man saying his final parting words to him and his siblings before the sage's death, and of the 9 of them about to embark on a journey to see the world and hopefully meet the person the sage talked about. He was about to enter a large forested area when what? Kurama couldn't recall what he did afterwards, but he knew for a fact that it didn't involve getting locked up in a large, sewer-like prison. Hey, let me out. If this is a prank, it isn't funny. Grr. Shikaku. If this is your idea, you are so gonna get it when I get out of here. Kurama cried out before cocking one ear to the side to listen for a response. After a few minutes and not hearing anything, Kurama started to get really worried. Sure, the cage he was in looked like it was meant to hold something at least 5 times his size, but the bars were fairly close together, and he noticed when he would get close to them it felt like some sort of force was pushing him back. Now, while Kurama tries to put up a brave front most of the time, the truth is he's really timid. Not that he'd ever let anyone, least of all his siblings, know that. He was still catching grief from Shikaku about how he was caught crying after he got one of his 9 tails stuck on a tree branch. Stupid Tanuki, let's see how tough he is if he got his one tail caught and painfully pulled on for nearly an hour, and then having to groom the thing back to its normal state. At least Kurama knew he was stronger than the one-tailed raccoon, something that he always used to get under that idiot's skin. At least Shikaku left his crying at the old man's farewell alone. They all missed the man they came to see as a father of sorts, even though it had been only around a week since he passed on from this life. Kurama was brought out of his musings when he realized his chakra felt weaker than before. With a start, he realized that he was missing half of it. Now Kurama was really starting to get worried. He was locked up in a scary, unknown place with half of his chakra gone. And what's worse is that it looked like no one was around to hear his calls. He suddenly noticed a slight pull on his chakra and noticed that it felt familiar. Kurama then yelped in surprise when it came to him why the pull felt familiar was because whenever he was part of the Kyuubi with his siblings they all noticed a similar pull while they were sealed inside the old man. That could only mean one thing. Someone had sealed him inside another person. Kurama spent the better part of an hour trying to figure out who sealed him, why was he sealed, who or what was he sealed in, and could he contact the outside world, or at least his siblings. Reaching out with his mind, Kurama could faintly detect the presence of the other tailed beasts, but for some reason they felt different, almost like their chakra was older or something, but the signal was too weak to tell. His siblings must have been too far away to get a proper reading. Kurama next tried to learn more about his new host. He tried forming a mental link, but the seal holding him back was too strong. The only way he could contact whoever sealed him would be if the person actually tried to contact him in some way. Kurama sat on his haunches and pondered what to do while further taking in his new surroundings. Man, this is such a drag. In the outside world, most of the men of the Nara clan sneezed. I have no idea what's going on, and to top it all off, I'm stuck in this creepy place. Feeling slightly frustrated, Kurama curled up into a furry little ball and tried to fall back to sleep with little success. When he finally managed to drift off to La La Land, his dreams were filled with nightmares of burning villages and people with strange red eyes. Scene break, Naruto. Naruto was having a pretty crappy day. True, most of his days were pretty crappy, but today seemed especially to be going down the toilet. Naruto was a young, 4-year-old boy with wild blonde hair, clear sapphire blue eyes, and curiously enough, 3 whisker marks on both of his cheeks. Naruto had noticed at a young age that he seemed to be ignored by most adults while outright hated by others. He had no idea why this was, and no one seemed to want to answer his questions on the subject, not even the old man with the awesome hat who sometimes took him out for ramen, which quickly became his favorite food. The young blonde had been introduced to hardships early in his life because it had been 2 weeks since he was evicted from the orphanage he had spent his entire young life at. The owner of the orphanage had apologized to him and said that there was no longer any room for him to stay at and that he needed to leave ASAP. Naruto had wandered down the streets of Konoha, aka the Hidden Leaf Village, for about a week with little food and having to sleep in alleys or in the shade of trees surrounding the village. The only things in his possession were the clothes on his back with a few changes along with his toothbrush that were strung up in a bag he carried with him. His first thought was to find the previously mentioned old man, who he had heard people call Lord Hokage. Man, he wished people treated him with that kind of respect. His second thought was that he had no idea where to find the old man, so he was completely lost at what to do. After a week had passed, he had been found by 2 ANBU members, one with a dog mask and spiky silver hair, while the other had a cat mask and long purple hair. They had taken him to see Old Man Hokage, and boy, was he mad at the orphanage owner when he found out what happened. The old man was able to get the child an apartment set up at the edge of town and had provided him with weekly payments to get by, as well as a few lessons on how to take care of himself. This had cheered the young boy up immensely, but he was still unhappy due to how the other people of the village just seemed to ignore his existence. This led to Naruto's current predicament with his particularly bad day. He had trouble making friends at the orphanage because most people he met would be adopted soon afterwards while he would be constantly overlooked. He had decided a week since moving into his new residence that he would see if he could make any friends at the local park and hoped that the kids his age wouldn't treat him like most adults did, with either indifference or hatred and fear. Unfortunately, after he had arrived to the park and tried to talk to some kids, their parents would usher them away from him and tell them to not associate with him. Even the pretty pink-haired girl he saved from those bullies was dragged away from him. Night had fallen and Naruto went back to his apartment feeling more depressed than before. As he curled up into bed after a meal of instant ramen, which was all he could afford since most stores seemed to charge him extra for most items while calling it an orphan tax, he slightly cried at the direction his life was heading, and his final thought before he drifted off to sleep was, "I wish I had a friend." Scene break, Mindscape. Naruto woke to find himself standing in some kind of sewer with water that reached up to his ankles, though he curiously didn't feel wet at all. Wondering how he got there, he wandered down the corridors with pipes lining the walls. He suddenly found himself in a large room with an equally large cage located on the other side that seemed to be held close with a simple strip of paper with the word "seal" written on it. In the shadows of the cage, there seemed to be a large shadowy object that was completely still save for the rise and fall of its side to the sound of what Naruto recognized as breathing. Timidly, the young blonde crept closer to the cage in hopes of seeing what the shadowy object was. Suddenly, the shadowy object started to move as its breathing pattern changed. Panicking, Naruto then ran as quietly as he could to the nearest corner of the room and hid in the shadows, hoping that whatever was in the cage wouldn't see him. Kurama awoke with a slight start from his soon-to-be-forgotten nightmares and yawned while stretching each of his 9 tails. He looked around blearily for a moment before he remembered his previously awakening and his current predicament. The young fox then noticed a new smell that had entered the room since he woke up. Squinting his red eyes a little, he could make out a tiny shape huddled in the shadows in the far corner of the room. Timidly he called out, "H. Hello? Is someone there?" Naruto gave a slight jump at the voice that penetrated the darkness. It sounded kind of dark and scary while still holding a childlike quality to it. Because the voice seemed more scared than threatening, Naruto slowly edged his way over towards the cage and was able to get a good look at the being inside it. The unknowing Jinchuriki saw a fairly large canine-shaped figure that had orangish-red fur that was black surrounding the eyes, which were red and slitted. The being had 9 swaying tails behind it as well as weirdly hand-shaped front paws and large rabbit-like ears that were cutely flopped to their sides. The being was a few feet taller than the boy but looked less intimidating than Naruto first thought it looked in the shadows. The young boy tried to process what the being was in front of him and came to a quick conclusion. "Puppy!" the blonde happily yelled out. "Rights to this joke go to Fatal Force." Kurama was busy taking in the human before him and noticed the child was different from the old man. Since this was, to his memory, only the second human he had ever met, he wondered if other humans came this small. Sure, the old man was smaller than him, but not by much, while this human in front of him barely reached halfway up his front leg. The fox kid then took note of the strange human's blonde hair, bright blue eyes, and curious whisker marks, and he wondered if other humans had similar markings. Despite his inner inquiries, Kurama was still incredibly nervous because, even though he knew he was the strongest of the Biju and quite possibly the strongest being on the planet, the fox kid had no idea what the other human was capable of. For all he knew, the child before him was the one who sealed the 9-tailed fox inside of himself. It was then that the young fox heard the equally young boy's comment and bristled in indignation. "Hey, I'm a fox, not some puppy." The Biju child growled at the young human, his nervousness and confusion momentarily forgotten. "Holy cow, you can talk?" came Naruto's smart reply. "Of course I can," Kurama said while puffing his chest out in an attempt to look more impressive to the child. His posturing was completely shattered by the next sentence that was filled with uncertainty, which returned with vengeance. W? Who are you anyway?" "Oh yeah, my name's Naruto Uzumaki. What's yours?" "My name's Kurama. So, do you know where we are?" Kurama asked. Even though he had a good idea, he still wanted confirmation. He still didn't fully trust the blonde and was trying to determine if the boy was responsible for his current imprisonment or not. "Beats me. Last thing I remember was falling asleep in my apartment. Do you have any idea where we are?" Naruto asked while scrunching up his face in a thinking pose which made his face take on a fox-like appearance. "Well, I'm not sure, but I think this may be your mindscape," the former adult Biju stated warily, since he knew the boy was telling the truth thanks to his ability to sense negative emotions, so he could tell the boy was just as confused as he was. "My mind? Then how in the world did you get here? And why does my mind look like a sewer?" Naruto asked, surprised while wondering how a being easily 3 times his size could fit in his mind. He briefly considered it to be a ramen-induced nightmare but quickly dismissed the idea. There's no way God's gift to mankind would ever produce something as bad as a nightmare. "I wish I knew. Last thing I remember was that I was about to go looking for human settlements with my siblings like the old man wanted. The next thing I knew, I woke up here. And as for why your mind is like a sewer, well, maybe you've got your mind in the gutter." The last one was said with a nervous chuckle by the large fox. The childish Biju was starting to feel more comfortable around the young human because he could see the blatant confusion on the boy's face and felt no ill intent from his emotions, so he knew that if he was sealed into the blonde, it wasn't done with the child's consent. Kurama was also starting to realize the boy in front of him couldn't be much older than he was. Noting the childish innocence the boy radiated as well as the young feel the blonde's chakra had. "Hey, my mind's not in the gutter, you fur ball. And what did you mean by old man and siblings? You mean there are more giant foxes roaming around?" Naruto asked, wondering why he'd never heard of something like that before. You'd think giant foxes wandering around would be something that he'd at least hear about, even with his limited knowledge. Of course, the more he thought of it, the more awesome that sounded. Hey, come on. What 4-year-old boy wouldn't love to see giant talking animals? After slightly bristling at the furball comment, he got enough of that crap from Shikaku. Kurama said, "Well, not quite. You see, I have 8 other brothers and sisters, and the old man was the one who created us in a way. You humans called him the Sage of the 6 Paths, I believe, but he's gone now," he said with a downcast expression at the last part, his ears and tails drooping cutely. Naruto, feeling a sense of kinship with the large fox kit, decided to help cheer him up. Deciding to use Old Man Hokage's method of cheering him up, Naruto said, "Hey there, it's okay. Tell me what's wrong." Normally the boy wasn't as receiving of strangers as this due to how other people seemed to view him, but he could see the uncertainty and hurt in the fox's crimson eyes and realized they were similar to the look in his own eyes whenever he felt scared and alone. Snapping out of his slight stupor, Kurama cursed himself for his momentary show of weakness. Deciding that the boy was trustworthy enough, the fox decided to explain his predicament and hope for the best. The two started to talk and get to know each other better, hesitantly at first but with greater confidence as time went on. The strange duo talked about their pasts, how Kurama had felt with the old man's passing, his siblings and his relationship each of them. They then talked about how Naruto was treated by the village and how he hoped to gain recognition from those around him. Kurama felt a growing sense of respect and sympathy for the young blonde due to his never-give-up attitude he showed while describing his life. The kid also felt a pang of worry that the villagers' behavior towards the boy might be due to his being sealed inside the child. Why, he didn't know because he hadn't done anything in recent memory that would cause people to hate him, though he did remember the sage warning the Biju that humans may fear them because they wouldn't understand them. That didn't explain why Naruto didn't seem to fear him though. A thought suddenly occurred to him. "Hey, Naruto? You said we're in a village. Where is this village exactly?" "Oh, this is the Hidden Leaf Village in the Land of Fire. It's the greatest ninja village ever," explained Naruto, happy to remember his brief lessons the Hokage gave him after moving him into his apartment. Kurama, however, was at a loss. Ninjas? Hidden villages? What's going on? I know the people the old man had started to teach were calling themselves ninja, but there haven't been any villages formed yet. People were still discovering what chakra was the last time I checked. So how could there be any villages devoted to the old man's teachings? A strange but worrying thought occurred to Kurama. His current ceiling, ninjas with hidden villages, people not knowing about the sage or the Biju. It was like he moved forward in time, but that wasn't possible, right? So the large fur ball asked the whiskered child what the current date was, and after the kid answered, he started to panic. "Over 2,000 years. I've been thrown over 2,000 years into the future? How did this happen? What do I do now?" Naruto watched in concern as he watched his hopefully new friend go into a rather large panic attack. The boy tried calming the fox down by trying to get his attention, and then giving him some words of comfort. After the kid had finally calmed down, the two began discussing their next course of action while trying to figure out why Kurama was sealed in Naruto and why it seemed like the large fox had been transported 2 millennia into the future. After not coming up with any good excuses, the pair talked more on their likes and dislikes and just generally bonded well into the night. Chapter 3. Naruto awoke with a start. His eyes darted around the room and he noticed he was no longer in the sewer-like room but his own bedroom of his apartment. Naruto went through a whirlwind of emotions, the most prominent one being disappointment. After talking with Kurama for most of the night, the boy had thought he made his first real friend, only to wake up leading him to believe the previous night's events were only a dream. Did any of that actually happen? Is there really a fox sealed inside of me? It happened all right, said a very familiar voice out of nowhere, causing Naruto to leap around 10 feet in the air, giving off a high-pitched girlish squeal. Kurama's voice chuckled a bit before quipping, "Man, Naruto, you sure aren't a morning person, are you?" "Kurama, where are you? I don't see you anywhere," Naruto called out while searching around the room, even going as far as to look underneath his bed and in his closet. Inside the seal, Kurama didn't know whether to laugh or facepalm at his host's actions, so he settled for a sweat drop. "I'm still in your mind, Naruto. Now that we've made contact, I can talk to you whenever I want as long as you don't block me out. Did you honestly think I could hide myself in this tiny room?" he asked rhetorically. Naruto laughed sheepishly while rubbing the back of his head and said, "Well, what did you think if you heard a voice out of nowhere? So, are you still sure about the plan?" Earlier, Kurama had asked the blonde if there was anyone he knew who might have an idea on why the fox was currently sealed in the boy and why it seemed like he was transported into the future. Naruto, after much thinking, had decided that Old Man Hokage would most likely have the answers. After all, he had seen many people come to the elderly man with questions during the times the man came to visit him on his birthdays. Naruto figured that if anyone could answer his questions, it'd be the old man. That and the fact that he was one of a few people the boy wholeheartedly trusted. The whiskered child told his newly found friend about the old man, and the fox had decided it would probably be for the best if the blonde met with the aged leader. "I'm sure. Hopefully this Hokage guy can answer our questions, or at least show us someone who can," Kurama replied with a nod of his vulpine head. He also figured that if the man tried anything fishy, he'd be able to sense his ill intentions and be able to get Naruto safely away using his chakra. "Alrighty then, but first some breakfast." Naruto cheered happily while going into his kitchen and pulling out some instant ramen. Through Naruto's eyes, Kurama looked on questioningly. "Hey Naruto, what's that?" causing the blonde to halt in his tracks with a wide-eyed expression. "What? You've never heard of ramen before? It's only the greatest food on God's green earth. Anyone who doesn't know that must be enlightened," Naruto cried out while an angelic light surrounded him, and you could faintly hear a chorus singing in the background. How'd he do that? Kurama wondered about the strange phenomenon before shaking his head and, deciding to amuse the blonde, said, "Well, I've never heard of it, but I think I know of a way I can. You see, if you allow it, I can interact with the world through your body. From what I can tell of this seal, though, it'd only let me if you willingly allow it." Naruto thought about it, and even though he was creeped out by the whole using your body thing, I mean, what kind of sick, twisted, most likely pedophilic person would ever use that sentence? Meanwhile, in the still forming sound village, an extremely pale man sneezed. Naruto decided he'd allow it because he wanted to have a good relationship with his newfound friend, and he also felt obligated to show the fox the beauty that is ramen. So, with a mental nod of his head, Naruto allowed the nine-tailed fox interact with the world for the first time in 4 years. Not that either of them were aware of this fact. Naruto's eyes became red, with his pupil becoming a narrow slit. While the Jinchuriki was aware of his surroundings and still had control of his body, it felt as though another presence was with him, almost like when someone stares over your shoulder. The 4-year-old poured the cooked ramen into a bowl after the aggravating 3-minute wait and started to dig in. Meanwhile, inside the seal, Kurama's eyes widened comically as he was able to taste the noodles through his host's senses. The young fox had never tasted anything like it before, and he loved it. It was almost better than having live game from a forest. After Naruto slurped down the last of the ramen, Kurama said, "That was awesome. Is there any way we can get more?" Naruto could practically see the waterfall of drool coming from the fox kit's mouth as his 9 tails wagged behind him. Naruto grinned a foxy smile. Yet another person has been taught the wonders of ramen. He couldn't wait to introduce Kurama to Ichiraka's ramen. Naruto changed into his street cloths after his morning routine of brushing his teeth and showering before heading out the door to go meet with the old man. Scene break. Hiruzen Sarutobi, nicknamed the god of shinobi and the professor by his peers, He was a man who led his village as its Hokage for many years and had lived through all three major ninja wars. The elderly man had been taught by both the first and second Hokage and had retaken his mantle after his predecessor died in the Kyuubi attack 4 years ago. This great man was currently in his office and had just won a battle with his eternal nemesis. Paperwork. The aged leader smiled and leaned back in his chair while lighting up his pipe. So far the day had been going well for the man. He had visited his recently born grandson Konohamaru and was able to finish the towering stack of papers fairly early, having worked on most of them the previous night, so he'd be able to have a me day. The third Hokage stretched his stiff muscles and was just about to reach into his desk to pull out his student's latest Ika book when his office door opened. Muttering a slight curse under his breath, the closet pervert looked to see who interrupted his me time. When he saw the mop of blonde hair, he smiled warmly and said, "Well, good morning there, Naruto." Naruto Uzumaki filled Hiruzen with both happiness and regret. It saddened the man that it was unlikely that the boy would ever live a normal childhood, given his little condition. The elderly Sarutobi knew that the boy's life would be difficult due to his status as a host of the most powerful Biju, but it couldn't really be helped. Too many people had been present to witness Minato seal the beast into the newborn and, rather than risk that information leaking out without his knowledge and causing a riot, he decided to announce the boy's status to the village along with Minato's last wish for the boy to be seen as a hero in the hopes that the villagers would listen to their deceased leader's wish. It was all for naught, sadly, as most people let their grief and hatred override all sense of reason. Fortunately, nobody had actively gone out of his way to harm the child. Just to be sure, he had Umbu members on constant guard around the boy to stop any random drunkard or hateful villager, but the results were less than satisfactory. The villagers had opted to just ignore Naruto's existence, besides the occasional derogatory insult aimed his way. Even though Hiruzen had forbade all talk of the boy's status to anyone under Chunin rank or outsider, the people of the village had instead found a loophole by telling the children and any newcomers to the village that the boy was a no-good troublemaker. The Hokage might be the supreme power in the village, but even he couldn't change people's hearts. The only real major scare he had with the boy, though, happened recently when the owner of the orphanage that Naruto was living in kicked the boy out a few weeks ago. Hiruzen had personally seen to it that the man got taught a lesson by Ibiki in the T&I division with the help of his latest assistant Anko. He also made sure that the boy was given a place to stay as well as lessons on how to live on his own, so if Naruto ever found himself in a similar predicament, at least the old man would rest easier knowing he could take care of himself. Sarutobi knew that his life in the village might improve if he told the villagers, or even the boy himself, who his parents were, but he also knew that the potential cost outweighed the benefits. But with the bad came the good. Naruto had a sunny disposition despite his hardships and a personality that just made people want to trust him if they ever got to know him. The elderly leader just knew that the boy was destined for great things. His mind snapped back to reality when said boy called out, "Good morning, old man. How are you doing?" "Oh, this morning is going quite well for me, Naruto. So tell me, how have things been? Are you adjusting all right to your new home?" the professor said while putting out his pipe so he didn't damage the boy's lungs. "It's been going great so far, old man. I'm able to make my own meals and stuff all by myself and everything," the young boy said excitedly. "Oh, and I've made a new friend named Kurama. He's actually one of the reasons I wanted to stop by, 'cause we both got some questions for you." "That's wonderful news, Naruto. It's always a privilege to make new friends. So, who's Kurama and what questions do the two of you have?" Hiruzen said while on the inside he was extremely happy for the boy he'd come to see as a surrogate grandson. The old ninja was taking a long drink of some freshly brewed tea when the boy answered. "He's a big fox I met last night in my mind, and the two of us were wondering what's he doing sealed inside me?" the boy asked innocently and bluntly. Let it be known that there are few things that could startle Hiruzen Sarutobi, but that question made the aged leader spit out the lukewarm tea he'd been drinking all over his desk. Unfortunately, the tea had soaked all of the papers he had just spent the last 2 days working on, ruining them completely. "Oh!" Inner Hiruzen screamed while crying anime tears, while the real Hiruzen just stared at the young blonde in naked shock. He stared at the boy for a good 5 minutes while sputtering nonsense before Naruto started to wave his hand in front of his face and saying, "Hey old man, you still there?" The third quickly shook his head and cleared his mind before looking at the blonde's questioning face before asking, "How did you end up meeting this Kurama? Was it? And what did the two of you talk about?" After Naruto explained how he met the young fox and their discussion, Hiruzen went into deep thought. Has the Kyuubi honestly lost its memory? Or is it simply trying to trick Naruto? Kushina and Lady Mito once said that any contact that they made with the beast were never civil, so why does it seem like Naruto is different? And why does the fox call itself Kurama? Does it actually have a name? I better gain another opinion on this before I make any decisions. Calming his features, the professor looked at the boy and said, "Well, Naruto, I do understand a bit of what happened to your new friend. However, I need to talk to a few other people just to be sure on the matter. If it is all right with you, can you come back sometime tomorrow afternoon? I'll make sure to answer your questions then to the best of my ability." Naruto tilted his head like he was listening to something or someone and after a moment said, "Sure, old man. I'll make sure to come by tomorrow." Before the blonde left, the older man called out to him, "Oh, and Naruto, don't try doing anything in the seal until after tomorrow, please. We wouldn't want anything bad to happen now, would we?" Naruto gave an affirmative wave before heading out the door. After the blonde left, Hiruzen paged his secretary and said, "Get me Jiraiya and Inoichi. They both should be in Konoha at this time, so please make sure they arrive on the double." With that, the god of shinobi turned to his stack of ruined papers and thought, "Now how can I make these papers mysteriously disappear without a trace?" Scene break. Naruto casually strolled down the streets of Konoha while having a mental conversation with his foxy friend. While both were slightly upset that they couldn't get their answers right away, both of them could see that the information had shocked the old Kage and they figured if he needed to take a moment to process everything. It did slightly worry the duo about how there might be more people getting involved, but figured that their current situation was over both their heads, so having other inputs might not be a bad thing. Plus, they figured the elderly leader wouldn't betray their trust so readily anyway, in their childlike innocence. "So Kurama, anything you'd like to do today?" Naruto asked his friend out loud, earning a few weird glances from nearby spectators. Inside the seal, Kurama scratched his head in thought before saying, "Well, is there any place where I can get a full view of this village? I've never really seen a human town before, so I'm kinda curious. Oh, and before I forget, you might want to talk to me using your thoughts from now on. I think you're making others think you're crazy." Naruto looked around and finally noticed that everyone was looking at him like he grew a second head. Still beat the glares though. He laughed sheepishly while rubbing the back of his head before sprinting towards the park. The whiskered child figured that the best way to show the kid the sights was to go to the top of the Hokage monument that overlooked the village. As the boy traveled through the park that leads to the monument, he came upon an infuriating sight. A group of boys a few years older than him were surrounding a dark-haired girl around his age and seemed to be shouting out random insults at the trembling girl. There were such phrases used as pale-eyed freak and stuck-up noble among them. The girl was clearly shaken and was trying not to cry, which seemed to encourage the bullies to increase their verbal assault. Then one of the boys shoved the girl from behind, causing her to fall on her knees. Despite what happened after he saved that pink-haired girl from a similar situation a few days ago, Naruto's chivalry and sense of protecting those in need rose up with a vengeance. Kurama was mimicking his Jinchuriki's train of thought and started to leak some of his chakra to the boy. The boy's pupils became slits while his whisker marks thickened a bit, but no other immediately noticeable changes occurred. The blonde rushed forward and delivered a wicked haymaker to the bully who pushed the girl, sending him flying while missing a few baby teeth. The other boys, after getting over their initial shock, started to rush the younger child. Naruto ducked under one boy's punch with speed he didn't know he had and delivered a roundhouse kick to the back of the boy's knees, causing him to collapse in a heap. The next two rushed him at the same time with their fists drawn back, but, due to Kurama's quick advice, the fox container was able to duck at the last second, causing the boys to knock each other out. The final boy tried going in for a snap kick to the blonde's temple, but the shot only grazed him, leaving a slight cut. Naruto saw an opening and punched around the boy's still outstretched leg, nailing him square in the family jewels. With all the bullies laid either out cold or in too much pain to cause further problems, the whisker-marked boy moved over to the girl he saved, who was still on the ground but in a bent-over position with a wide-eyed expression having seen the whole one-sided fight. Naruto's features quickly returned to normal and his cut had already started to close as he moved over to the girl's position. Absent-mindedly noticing the girl's strange pupil-less pale lavender eyes, Naruto asked, "Hey, you all right?" Snapping out of her daze, the girl looked at her savior and stuttered out, "Why yes, thank you for saving me," she said shyly. Naruto gave a fox-like smile and said, "No problem. I hate it when jerks like them pick on others. My name's Naruto Uzumaki. What's yours?" Slightly startled by the sudden change in topic, the girl said timidly, Hinata Hyuga." "Hinata? That's a pretty cool name. Mine means maelstrom, you know," Naruto said in his usual loud way of speaking. "So what were those boneheads messing with you for?" Internally, Naruto was asking Kurama what he thought was wrong with the girl, as she kept stuttering and was looking a progressively darker shade of red. The Biju child just shrugged his hairy shoulders and said, "Beats me. Maybe she's still in shock or something?" Mentally nodding at the reasonable explanation, Naruto turned his attention to the young heiress before him as she was finally able to stutter out a response. "Well, they might not have liked me for my C clan. Most people seem to hold the Hyuga clan in high regard. But others look to us with jealously." Hinata stuttered over her explanation that her father had given to her on why some people would treat her the way they do outside their compound. She hadn't fully understood it until today, due to her guardian allowing her to go to the other side of the park as long as she promised not to go far so she could spend time with children her own age. She was just out of KO's range of normal sight and hearing when the bullies had surrounded her and the following chaos ensued. Hinata was still trying to piece together why the blonde, she blushed to herself, had gone out of his way to save her even though it looked like he had no idea who her clan was, let alone that she was the heiress of said clan. Just as she was about to give her thanks to the boy, she heard Ko calling out to her and saw the branch member standing on the hill looking worried. Hinata then turned to the mysterious boy and bowed while saying a quiet, "Thank you." Naruto looked slightly bashful at the rare display of respect to him and said, "That's all right. Hope to catch you around, Hinata." Said girl turned maroon and said shyly, "I'd like that," before heading over to where her guard was waiting for her. Naruto nodded his head and said, "She seems nice, a little weird, but nice," while on the inside he was hoping he had made another possible friend in the stuttering girl. "Gotta agree with you there, Naruto. Hope those idiots learned their lesson not to mess with us, huh?" said a certain fox Biju. Naruto blinked and said, "Oh, that reminds me. What did you do, Kurama? I suddenly moved faster than ever and was able to take those jerks down with one hit." Kurama nodded with a flop of his long ears and said, "Yeah, that's because I channeled some of my chakra into you." Noticing Naruto's dumbfounded expression, Kurama elaborated, "It basically means I let you use some of my power so you wouldn't get your butt kicked by those other humans." "Wow, so that's what your power is like?" It felt awesome, like I could do anything at all. If we work together, we could become an awesome ninja duo in the future. Believe it. Heh, that'll be something to think about later. Right now you promised to show me the sights, you know what I mean? Kurama said before thinking, why does it feel like I learned that from someone else? Naruto gave a nod and raced up the mountainside to sit on his favorite spot in the village, at the top of the fourth Hokage's stone head. Kurama looked at the breathtaking sight through Naruto's eyes and thought, wow, this is beautiful. Naruto grinned and said, it sure is, isn't it? The two spent the better part of an hour just watching the village from their vantage point in a comfortable silence before Naruto started to head back home, so he could rest up for his meeting with the old man the next day. Chapter 4. The blaring of an alarm clock tore through the silence of a darkened room. The figure laying on the bed next to the evil device got up with a start before slamming his hand down on the off button. Hard. One Naruto Uzumaki gave a loud yawn as he rubbed the sleep from his eyes. Our favorite blonde looked over at the calendar and, noticing the date, gave a wide smile. "Today's the day!" The now 8-year-old ninja wannabe exclaimed happily while bounding out of bed in an excited manner to get dressed. The boy quickly changed into a new set of clothes set out specifically for today. A white shirt with a red flame design on them with pants that were black and had an orange trim. Feeling a familiar presence stirring in the back of his mind, Naruto gave a mental message to his closest friend, "Good morning, Kurama." "Mornin', Naruto." The now house-sized fox mumbled over a huge yawn filled with razor-sharp teeth. Kurama had grown quite a bit over the last 2 years. Before he was at least twice the size of an average man. Now he towered over most people, something the fox would tease his host about relentlessly. Jerk. A lot had happened over the years, and all of it had only strengthened the two boys' bond. When the two went to see the Hokage after the first meeting, they were met by not only the old man, but by a familiar middle-aged white-haired man and a younger man with pale blonde hair and pupilless blue eyes. The white-haired man, whose name was Jiraiya, asked the boy to lift up his shirt, which he did after getting the okay from the Hokage. The trio stared at his belly for a few minutes, talking in murmured voices too quiet for the child to hear. Jiraiya then had Naruto pull his shirt down and then gestured to the room's other occupant. The blonde man, who was named Inoichi Yamanaka, then performed a jutsu with the old man and Jiraiya placing their hands on his shoulders, while the man himself placed his hand on Naruto's head. After a moment of vertigo, not that Naruto knew what that was, passed, and he found himself with the trio of men in the familiar sewer of his mindscape. What happened next was a memory the two boys would treasure for the rest of their lives. The three men got one look at Kurama, went white in the face, and passed out while foaming at the mouth. Oh, how Naruto wished he could have gotten a potentially blackmailing photo of that. After successfully waking the men up, Naruto and Kurama started asking their questions and hoped that they would finally get their answers. Whatever they were expecting to be told, it certainly wasn't what they got. Kurama still broods on what has happened to the Biju over the years, even though he strongly denies ever doing something as emo as brooding. But, thanks to encouragement from Naruto, Hiruzen, and surprisingly Jiraiya, Kurama resolved to help change humanity's views regarding the tailed beasts, to which Naruto agreed to help in any way possible. Afterwards, Naruto asked if he could remove the seal holding the young Biju in the cage but was told to wait a few years to make sure he'd survive the process, because even if the fox wouldn't harm the boy in any way, the sudden influx of chakra would possibly hurt or even kill him. The session took most of the day, but by the end of it the duo felt that while they both had the answers they wanted, it just led to even more questions. Before leaving the mindscape, Jiraiya took one more look at the seal and went to discuss his findings with the two other men after Naruto left for the day. It wasn't until nearly a week later when they got back to the boy on their finds regarding the most important question. Why didn't Kurama remember any of this? The answer was quite surprising. As it turns out, when the fourth had sealed half of the fox's chakra away into the Reaper, the jutsu had apparently taken a large chunk of Kurama's memories as well. The resulting loss of chakra and memory loss had caused the Biju's body to revert to the state where his memories ended at, which was shortly after his birth, too. It was also unlikely he'd ever regain his memories, but he should be able to grow up like normal after a few years and recovering his lost chakra. 3. The following few years were quite productive for the Jinchuriki and his tenant. In order to catch Kurama up to date on what all has happened in the world in the last few millennia, Naruto started reading up on history thanks to the library access granted to him by the Hokage. While reading defiantly wasn't one of Naruto's favorite pastimes, he did find learning more about past ninjas was way cool. It was through his studies that Naruto realized that if he ever wanted to become a great ninja like the ones from history, he needed to train as hard as he could as soon as possible. So, looking through other books available that dealt with shinobi training, Naruto began rigorously training his body and mind. In the morning he'd do stretches followed by a series of workouts that worked for his young body. Next, he'd take a few laps around the village and would head to the training fields after increasing his laps by 1 every day. Naruto would then start practicing his ninja tools training. This was somewhat harder as stores didn't sell ninja tools to underage civilians, but this was remedied by finding some of the discarded tools left by previous ninjas. They didn't always work well, but it was sufficient for his needs. After his physical training was done, he'd start working on his chakra control. Thanks to some tips he got from the old man as well as Kurama, turns out a being whose body was made of chakra had quite a bit of knowledge on chakra. Who knew? He was able to unlock his chakra after only a few weeks of practice. Then came the difficult part. Kurama explained to the blonde that his chakra was already fairly large. Added to the fox's own incredible supply left the boy with a near infinite amount of chakra. Normally this would be a good thing, seeing as it would enable Naruto to fight for longer periods of time using high-level moves, but the larger chakra reserves resulted in causing him to have a harder time controlling it. Fortunately, Kurama was able to monitor his host's chakra as he used it and would tell Naruto whether he was using too much or too little. It took nearly a year, but Naruto could now successfully do the leaf sticking and the tree climbing exercises. He'd still have trouble staying afloat on water for more than a minute for the water walking exercise, but he was making steady progress. After stopping for lunch, Kurama insisted nearly every day that they go to Ichiraku's. Not that he was complaining. They'd then get to work on utilizing their chakras together. This was fairly touch and go for a while since Kurama had never shared his chakra with a human before, to his knowledge anyway. And Naruto found that while the fox's chakra felt incredible, the longer he used it or the more he used would cause his body to undergo a lot of strain. Sarutobi, after finding out about this training method, insisted that the boy would only use Kurama's chakra while having an Umbu observer, to make sure he didn't hurt himself or others. While the Umbu would remain hidden, Naruto and Kurama could still almost always spot them anyway. All of this training for the past 4 years had also led to a slightly bad hobby forming. After their training for the day was done, the two boys would usually spend the day goofing around, at least Naruto did, while Kurama observed from his spot in the seal, and Kurama would tell our favorite ninja wannabe some stories about his siblings and the adventures they'd get into. This led Naruto to make an interesting discovery. He loved the pranks that the Biju children would play on each other so much that he decided to try some for himself. What resulted was destructive, terrible, and outrageously funny. Naruto became so good at his pranks it required at least several teams of ninjas to track him down afterwards. Kurama encouraged the boys' antics because not only did he find them all hilarious, but it also served as decent stealth training for his future ninja career. Just think, if he could successfully prank a village full of shinobi and get away with it, imagine what he could do to enemy ninja? Finally, after all this time, Naruto was finally heading off to the Ninja Academy. After a hasty breakfast, Naruto quickly sped off to the academy by bounding across the rooftops. Before long, the blonde reached the front of the school with a good half-hour to spare. Racing to his homeroom, Naruto noticed only 3 other students had arrived. One was a fairly tall boy whose head was covered in a hood by a long jacket over his body, despite the day's heat, and had a pair of dark shades over his eyes. Another was a slightly pale boy with slightly spiky black hair and a long-sleeved shirt with a fan symbol sewn in the back. The last was a familiar figure that Naruto happily went up to without a second thought. "Morning, Hinata," Naruto called out happily, glad to see a familiar face on the first day already. The pale-eyed girl gave a startled eep before turning to the whiskered boy and gained a slight blush on her face before mumbling out a quiet, "Good morning, Naruto. I am glad to see you too." After the day they met 4 years ago, the two children had met on occasion afterwards, though under the strict supervision of Hinata's guardian, Ko. It turns out Hinata's father, Hayashi, was actually thankful to the young Jinchuriki for helping his daughter in a time of need. That said, the very intimidating father wanted to make sure that if the two kids were together, they needed to be under adult supervision at all times. This was in order to, in Hayashi's own words, prevent any funny business. The man needn't have worried though, because Naruto always made sure to be on his best behavior around Hinata, seeing as he didn't want to drive away the first human friend he had. This, in time, gathered a notable change in the young heiress. While not the shining example of confidence that her clan wanted her to be, she gained enough confidence to stand up for herself more frequently and was able to spar in matches without hesitating as much. This alone was enough for Hayashi and the Hyuga clan elders to allow her to continue her friendship with the village's pariah. The two children made idle chatter while waiting for class to start, all the while observing the arriving students. Most looked fairly generic, but a few caught Naruto's interest. One was the pink-haired girl he met years ago, but she largely ignored him despite his friendly wave. The next was a blonde-haired girl that Naruto recognized as Inoichi's daughter Ino. Two boys arrived at roughly the same time. One was a sleepy-looking kid whose hair was tied up in a ponytail. The next was a pudgy. Did the room suddenly get colder? Boy who had swirl-like markings on his face and was happily munching on some chips. The last was a slightly wild-looking boy who had fang-like tattoos on his face and strongly smelled of dogs. After the class had been seated, two men wearing Chunin vests entered the room, one of whom Naruto recognized immediately. "Irika, I didn't know you'd be my teacher," the Jinchuriki called out happily. The blonde met the scarred man a few weeks after he started learning the beautiful art of pranking. The man was always the first to catch him, no matter how well he hid. While their relationship was rocky at first, the two eventually developed an almost brotherly bond as time went on. The Chunin even told the whiskered boy of some of his own pranking moments, which he quickly came to regret as Naruto decided to try them himself later, and had even treated the blonde to ramen now and again. The scarred Chunin looked over to the boy and gave a warm smile. "Yes, Naruto. I'll be your teacher for the majority of your academic career. So from now on, please address me as Irika-sensei." Also, here Irika gained a stern yet slightly playful look. "Please refrain from doing any pranks, would you please? I'd rather you not make my job any more difficult than it needs to be." "No promises," the blonde ball of energy happily chirped. Irika just gave an amused shake of his head before turning to the rest of the classroom. "All right, students, as I mentioned to your classmate Naruto here, my name is Irika Umino, but please address me as Irika-sensei for the duration of our time together as student and teacher. This here is my assistant and friend Mizuki." He gestured to the silver-haired man who nodded in acknowledgement. "It is our job to teach you the fundamentals of becoming a shinobi of the Leaf Village in order to better prepare you for the life you've chosen to lead. It is our village's belief that your comrades are your life, and I expect each of you to look out for one another both on and off the line of duty. Now let's do roll call. When I say your name, please say 'here.'" As Irika started listing off the students' names, Naruto felt the familiar presence of Kurama enter his mind. "Careful, Naruto," the chibi fox growled out. "I'm not liking the feel of that other guy." "I know what you mean," Naruto silently acknowledged. "The way he's just leaking hatred like that's giving me the creeps." Naruto had discovered, after a few months of training with Kurama's chakra, that he was able to feel other people's emotions, more specifically negative emotions. When asking the fox about it, Kurama explained that one of his many talents was the ability to sense the negative emotions of other living things and, due to their attempts at synchronizing their chakra, he was able to pass this ability on to his host. Now Naruto could get a general view on the intentions of other people. He had learned to tune it out at times, so he didn't become overwhelmed from the constant influx of emotions though, especially when he was around some of the more ignorant citizens of Konoha. Irika started speaking again, causing the blonde to forget about the potentially hostile presence in the room. "Alright, so starting today we'll be working on chakra control and move on to taijutsu practice and have a history lesson to finish of the day. Any questions? No? Then let's get started." Naruto grinned. "The next few years were going to be epic. 4. Omake. 1. Naruto had woken up a few hours ago and was now heading to the old man's office for their meeting. Kurama and he were wondering what all they should ask the aged leader and who the man had told about their situation when they noticed something weird. On the way to the Hokage's tower, the duo had passed the local hot spring and had heard a strange giggling. Curious as to what was so funny, Naruto had decided to look for the source of the laughter. What he found was a strangely dressed white-haired man peeking through a hole in the fence. "What do you think he's looking at, Kurama?" Naruto asked mentally. "Beats me," the Biju said with a shrug of his furry shoulders. "But you should find out. Who knows? It just might end up being hilarious if that laughter's anything to go by." Letting his curiosity get the better of him, the blonde made his way behind the man, who was so engrossed in what he was watching that he didn't even hear the boy sneak up behind him. The boy tried to look at what the man was looking at, but the hole was too small and the man was in the way of the boy's view, so the boy decided to find out the old-fashioned way. "Hui wache doing, old man?" the blonde said loudly, causing the man to let out a squawk of surprise before he seemed to panic and disappear in a puff of smoke. You could practically see the question mark hanging over Naruto's and Kurama's heads as he looked at where the man was sitting at. Before he could look at the hole the man was looking in, he heard angry female voices coming his way. Panicking, the blonde ran to the nearby bushes to hide. Shortly afterwards, several women only clad in bath towels came out looking at the area with looks of bloody murder on their faces. "Who's out here?" one of the women yelled while pulling out a kunai knife from somewhere. "I swear, if there's a pervert creeping around here, I'll take what defines him as a man and shove it down his throat," another growled. A few minutes went by, with the women saying increasingly more violent and disturbing things, before they decided that no one was nearby and headed back to the hot spring. After making sure the coast was clear, our favorite blonde crawled out of the bushes, pale and shaking slightly. "Kurama?" Naruto thought shakily. "Yeah," Kurama asked, equally as nervous and pale as his host. "If I ever find out what a pervert is, please make sure I never become one." Those women were scary, the child thought in near hysterics. "You got it," Kurama acknowledged, also swearing to never become a pervert as soon as he knew what that was. Thus started both young boys' dislike of perverts and a healthy amount of respect and fear of the opposite gender. 2. I know it seems like a large conclusion to jump to, but the way I figure it is, they have a ninja named the Professor, a seal master, and a master of the mind working on the same problem. Chances are they'd come up with the right, if somewhat far-fetched, conclusion. 3. Now, a few people commented on how Kurama's body was smaller than it was in canon, but remember, this is a Kyuubi who has lost half of his chakra as well, so he's half his original size, even in kid form. Also, Kurama will eventually get back to normal size because not only will he grow up again, but I noticed that Kurama was around the same size as the other Biju in Shippuden, so that either means he was way bigger than his siblings before he lost his in chakra, or he regained his strength and size while resting in Naruto. That's the theory I'm going with anyway. 4. I'm thinking of posting a poll soon asking the question, should Naruto be able to summon Kurama out of the seal like he did in the movie Road to Ninja? Please let me know what you think. By the way, the new image is courtesy of the awesome artist Gotharas Raj on entitled Kids. You should go check it out. Chapter 5. So bored. Can't focus, Naruto thought as he rested his chin on his desk with eyes unfocused and a bit of drool leaking out of the corner of his mouth. The first few weeks of class had come and gone, and already Naruto was, like any student, already sick of the place and wanted out of there ASAP. Kurama wasn't much better as he curled up into his cage to fall asleep, snoring loudly. Lucky, Naruto thought sourly, as any time he or the one kid Shikamaru tried going to sleep in class, they'd get a piece of chalk thrown at their heads. At first the idea of the academy had excited him, but to his disappointment most of the stuff covered in class was materials he'd studied himself over the last 4 years. He had already covered most of the basics of learning about his chakra, had read even more of the history than what they went over in order to catch Kurama up to date on the world's events, and had even learned most of the taijutsu stances the academy taught through scrolls at the library. If things kept going at their current pace, Naruto would have to wait until his final year at the academy before he learned anything remotely new. The only upside was he could hang out with kids his own age and spend more time with Irika-sensei. There were 2 problems with that though. First, most of the students from civilian families kept far away from him, most likely on the order of their parents, while some of the students from shinobi families, sans Hinata, only paid him mild interest. The second problem was that while lecturing, Irika-sensei was boring. You'd think a former prankster would be able to keep a class interesting, but it turns out that's not the case. At one point he asked Irika why they taught history at a ninja academy, and the scarred Chunin replied, "We teach students history because those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it." While the blonde could see that logic, especially after reading on how the first 3 shinobi wars were started for relatively petty reasons, that didn't make learning this stuff twice any more exciting. Naruto had even gone as far as to look a little ahead in the textbooks in the academy, but was disappointed to learn most of the material was things he already knew. The only other person in the classroom who seemed to know as much about the text was the pink-haired girl Sakura Haruno. though it seemed most of her knowledge about the ninja world was purely academic, as she rather lacked in the hands-on classes. A few other students seemed to know quite a bit too, but they never showed it. Shikamaru Nara, the blonde saw, seemed highly unmotivated in the classroom, but during breaks he dominated the other students in games of shogi and go. There was also Shino Aburame, but he was rather reclusive, so it was hard to accurately judge how much he knew in class. Finally, there was Sasuke Uchiha of the now all but extinct Uchiha clan. While he held the current highest score in the class, he was nearly as withdrawn as Shino but slightly colder about it. Naruto couldn't really fault the boy, as he did have all his friends and family killed several months ago, but it was suffice to say that the boy did have a huge chip on his shoulders. Thinking of the brooding boy made Naruto think of when they were first introduced on the opening day during taijutsu practice. Flashback. The kids had lined up outside for their first lesson in taijutsu. Irika had decided that it'd be beneficial for the students to spar against each other to see how much they knew already and how they measured up to their peers. Naruto was nearly hopping with glee. Finally, a chance to prove to everyone how awesome he was. Careful, Naruto, don't want to get a swelled head. Any more of that and your goggles won't fit, Kurama quipped from his place in the seal. Naruto rolled his eyes at the fox's attempt at humor. Oh, come on, Kurama. This is the chance I've been waiting for. I've trained myself to the ground these past 4 years, and I really want to see how awesome I do against these guys, Naruto thought excitedly. The nine-tailed fox gave his rumbling chuckle as he said, just don't go too hard on them. Wouldn't be the best of first impressions if you wind up beating some unlucky classmate to a pulp. Naruto's attention was brought to the real world when he heard Irika start to speak. He showed the students how to make the friendship seal for friendly spars and called Shikamaru and his friend Choji Akimichi to start things off. The entire time the young Nara was muttering on what a drag the whole thing was while the chubby boy was looking nervous about fighting his friend. The spar, if you could call it that, ended really quickly as neither opponent wanted to fight. Ignoring Ino Yamanaka's screams about lazy good-for-nothings, the Nara went under a nearby tree to nap while Choji popped open a new bag of chips to continue his non-stop snacking. Irika had a sweat drop on the back of his head after that poor display and decided to call the next contenders. Naruto Uzumaki and Sasuke Uchiha. Come to the ring, Irika yelled out. Grinning like a madman, Naruto went into the ring and faced his opponent before his grin slowly faded. Naruto had recognized the spiky-haired boy in class but hadn't paid much attention to him, unlike 95% of the girls in class. Due to his quiet nature, but standing before him now, the Jinchuriki could clearly assess the boy, and what he saw was, man, this kid. The young Bijou trailed off inside Naruto's mind as they could both feel the hate literally rolling off the dark-haired boy. None of it seemed to be directed at his opponent though, to which Naruto was eternally grateful, but more inwards, and it was almost like Sasuke was looking through him. Almost as if the Uchiha was staring at another enemy besides the blonde. Naruto almost missed it when Irika-sensei started the match and Sasuke came at him with practiced ease. Whoa! Naruto thought as he was just able to avoid the boy's opening sweeping kick and retaliated with a frontal jab which was easily blocked. This guy's good. Naruto tried to feint the dark boy with another jab to the face while in actuality he aimed for a kick to the knee, but Sasuke saw through it and was able to wrap his arms around Naruto's outstretched leg and with a hard shove, drove the whiskered boy onto his back. Before Naruto could fully register what was happening, he felt a weight on his chest and a fist a mere inch from his face. Just like that, the match was over. He's really good, Naruto mentally gasped as he stared at the other boy's eyes, ignoring the cheers that came from the majority of the girls, sans Hinata, who looked on in concern at her secret crush. The look in the boy's eyes hadn't changed since the start of the match, looking at an opponent who wasn't there. I've been practicing those moves for years, and he saw through them all like they were nothing. He's different from the regular bullies I wail on. And that's the match, Irika called out, seeing little point in continuing because if this was a real fight to the death it'd be clear who the winner was. Sasuke got off his opponent and Naruto pushed himself up, brushing dust off the seat of his pants. Now make the friendship seal, Irika instructed the two boys. There was a tense moment when the two stared at each other before Naruto's face broke into a wide grin and held up his 2 fingers to make the seal. Wow dude, you're pretty strong. I thought I was good but you wiped the floor with me. We should totally do this again sometime. Sasuke's eyes widened momentarily before they went back to their apathetic mode and he scoffed saying, "Whatever," and quickly linked his fingers with Naruto's in the seal before letting go and walking off with his hands in his pocket. His entourage of fangirls cheering him on as he went. Hinata went over to her friend to see if he was alright, to which Naruto just laughed and waved it off. Inside his mind, however, he was having an internal discussion with Kurama. "You felt that too, didn't you?" Naruto questioned mentally. "Yeah," Kurama agreed. At the end there, that Uchiha kid felt more sad than angry. Wonder what's up with him. I once heard he was the last of his clan. Maybe something bad happened to him? Naruto mused before nodding his head as if coming to a decision. "Kurama," he began. The large fox questioned, wondering what his host was up to. "Let's become friends with him," Naruto thought excitedly. If he was being honest with himself, Naruto knew what it felt like to be lonely before he met his friend for life, as he sometimes called Kurama, and he wouldn't wish that feeling upon his worst enemy. If the dark-haired boy was as lonely and sad as he thought he was, then Naruto felt it was his duty to help him in any way he could. Kurama stayed silent as he knew what his host was thinking. Personally, he agreed with the blonde's actions, as anyone filled with that much anger, hate, and sadness should definitely be alone through life. Little did either know that this decision would have far-reaching consequences. Present. It was slow going at first, trying to befriend Sasuke. But if there is one thing Naruto Uzumaki is a quitter. Despite the Uchiha's antisocial behaviors, little by little the whiskered boy was able to get him to come out of his shell. It started with some simple spars, most of which Sasuke won, but now and then Naruto was able to pull out a win through determination, bullheadedness, and sheer dumb luck, though he'd insist it was because he's awesome. Later the survivor would start to hang out with Naruto and Hinata during lunch, much to his fan club's dismay. That said though, the boy didn't speak much and almost never smiled, let alone laugh. Naruto hoped, with time, Sasuke would be able to overcome the sadness and anger in his heart. Going back to class, Naruto smirked slightly as he eyed the clock on the wall. While he did say to Iruka-sensei he would try to avoid pranks in class, he made no such attempts for pranks outside of class. One of said pranks was going to go off in 3, 2, 1. Awawoof, who let fleas loose in the kennels? Came a shout that, while halfway across the village, sounded as if it happened right next to the academy. The scream belonged to a Ms. Tsum Inuzuka, the clan patriarch of the dog-using Inuzuka clan. Needless to say, having fleas released upon a clan who uses dogs as partners is considered to be a fairly bad situation. Iruka immediately turned towards Naruto who, besides having a huge smile on his face, was acting completely innocent. Knowing he couldn't pin anything on the boy, yet, he continued the lecture despite the class's now divided attention. "Let's hear it for timer seals," Naruto thought smugly. While not a master of sealing, Naruto had gotten quite good at some standard seals in the past few years, one of the reasons being so he could find a way to alter the seal holding Kurama so he'd have more freedom than he currently had. While not even remotely close to being good enough to tamper with the high-level seal on his stomach, Naruto was getting quite good at making storage seals and low-level paper bombs. Of course, in the hands of a prankster, let's just say that the results of learning these two types of seals were interesting. Naruto patted himself on the back for being able to stifle his laughter to not draw suspicion onto himself. Even so, he did notice Hinata giving him an amused/scolding look while he saw the ghost of a smirk on Sasuke's lips. He definitely counted that as a win, especially because he noticed Kiba Inuzuka, Tsum's son, snickering to himself at the outburst until he went pale when he realized he'd probably get blamed for this and have to clean up the resulting mess. Naruto gave a light chuckle as he turned back to the boring lecture and tried not to fall asleep and get nailed with a piece of chalk. Once lunch had rolled around, to which he had the standard 20 cups of instant ramen sealed in a scroll to keep them warm, Naruto was joined by Hinata and Sasuke, much to the Sasuke's fan club's displeasure, and was happily chatting with the two over his latest prank. He was just getting to the part where he had placed the timing seal holding the fleas directly behind the kennels to avoid detection, and how the seal was supposed to release another swarm of fleas in about 2 hours, once the other dogs had most likely received their flea baths and were thus flea-free at the time. Suddenly, the trio noticed several of the other kids, Kiba, Shino, Shikamaru, and Choji, were motioning over to them to sit with their group. Deciding to see what the other kids wanted, at least Naruto and Hinata did, Sasuke looked like he couldn't care less and went to join them for lunch. As it turns out, most of the kids found his little prank. They all knew it was him despite his efforts to look innocent, hilarious, and wanted to find out how he pulled it off. Soon, the group was starting to easily converse with each other, despite some of the members, Sasuke, Hinata, and Shino, antisocial personalities, while others, Shikamaru, found the whole thing to be troublesome yet fun. Kiba, Choji, and Naruto were by far the most outgoing members, but soon everyone was becoming incredibly relaxed around each other. By the end of the lunch period, the children were well on their way to becoming fast friends. Naruto smiled as he headed back to the classroom, a look that was shared by his tenant. Things were starting to defiantly look up. Omake, the storm. It was nearly a week since Naruto first met Kurama, and Konoha was experiencing one of the biggest storms of the year. Naruto was huddled up under the covers on his bed, wincing whenever there was a loud crack of thunder that sounded so far yet so close. Naruto always hated the rain. It was so depressing and gloomy. Plus, it reminded him of when he was forced to live on the street after he was kicked out of the orphanage and had to hide in a hollow tree whenever it rained. Seeing other trees falling to the storms always scared the boy into thinking his tree was next and nobody would find his body, squashed like a pancake under a tree. Another loud crack shook Naruto from his musings as he gave a yelp and dove under his bed, blankets still wrapped around him. Whimpering a little, Naruto decided to go into his mindscape where, despite its sewer-like appearance, was usually fairly quiet. As the blonde opened his eyes to a familiar setting, he heard a not-so-familiar sound. Curiously, the sound seemed to be coming from Kurama's cage. Worried for his foxy friend, Naruto went up to the bars and peered inside. What the blonde saw shocked him. Curled up into a little, still pretty big though, ball in the corner of the cage was the familiar fur ball that is Kurama. Judging from the sounds coming from the ball of fur, as well as the shaking of the ball's form, it was easy to see what was going on. Kurama was crying. Worried that his friend might be hurt, Naruto was able to squeeze through the bars and go over to where the fox was curled up before placing a comforting hand on the soft fur. Kurama gave a startled yelp at the sudden contact and whipped his head around to see what was touching him. Noticing his human friend, the fox lowered his defenses, though it was clear by the look on his face, he didn't like being seen in such a vulnerable position. "What's wrong, Kurama?" Naruto asked with concern. It's nothing, just." Before the powerful fox kit could finish, there was a booming echo that reverberated throughout the seal. It took Naruto a second to realize that the sound was the boom of thunder. Somehow, most likely due to the blonde trying to make the real world more accessible to his orange-furred companion, more of the outside influences could affect the seal. The downside of this is that noises such as thunder were able to get through to the seal. I just really don't like storms," Kurama said while peeking through the tails he wrapped around his face in fear. Feeling an even closer bond to the fox kit than he had previously, Naruto said, "I don't really like M myself. Would it be okay if I stayed here with you? Just so you don't get too scared, you know." Despite his trembling, Kurama sported a weak grin as he saw how pale and frightened Naruto looked. "Hey, I could say the same about you. But whatever, do what you like." Even though you could tell by his eyes, the fox was grateful for the company. Naruto leaned against Kurama's hairy side and slightly sunk into the soft fur. The boy turned around and spread his arms out, almost as if he was hugging the fox, as another roar of thunder echoed throughout the seal. Kurama's tails wrapped around both himself and his host as well, almost as if to shield them through the noise. They spent the night like this, taking comfort in each other's presence as they both drifted off to sleep. That one stormy night was like a prelude for both Jinchuriki and Bijou, as they would form an everlasting friendship and would stick together whenever things got bad. Chapter 6. Clone Jutsu. A 12-year-old Naruto shouted in the training field located near the academy. There was a puff of smoke, and once it cleared, what could only be described as a roadkill version of Naruto twitched next to the original before it too disappeared in a puff of smoke, leaving the boy once again alone in the field. There was silence for a few seconds before Naruto fell on his back with a frustrated grunt. "Dang it," he muttered. "You suck," Kurama rumbled in his host's mind, causing Naruto's eye to twitch repeatedly. Going into his mindscape, the blonde stared at the now Hokage Tower-sized fox in irritation. "Give me a break, man," Naruto grunted in frustration as he sat down on the floor of the cage, pulling a pouting fox-like face. "I keep trying to use less chakra like you, Hinata, Shikamaru, and Irika-sensei tells me, but even my minimum is too much for the stupid clone jutsu." Kurama gave a sigh that would probably topple trees and stretched up into a sitting position. "Why do you need to know this stupid jutsu anyway? I mean, the only way it'll be of any use is distracting enemies, and even then it'll only work if the enemy has half a brain. You could probably come up with better methods in your sleep, if your games of tag with those ninja are any clue." Running a hand through his spiky hair, Naruto gave a groan. "I know, Kurama, but according to Irika-sensei, it's one of the top 3 requirements to graduate. Apparently, it's supposed to help round us out as shinobi," he said using air quotes for the last few words. The Ninetales gave an eye roll at that. "I know that, moron. I was there, remember?" Ignoring the stink eye Naruto was giving him, the Titanic Fox continued. "What I meant was, why do you have to learn this jutsu? Because despite our best efforts, you really have way too much chakra to pull this off. If I was you, I'd go down to either Irika or Old Man Hokage and ask if there was any other jutsu you could use." Naruto blinked at that and smacked his hand over his face. "God, I'm stupid," he stated before looking up at the fox and giving a rueful smile. "Thanks, dude. Don't know what I'd do without you. Though you could have mentioned that earlier, you know?" "Oh, I know," Kurama said with a foxy grin. "I just found it way too funny to see you look like you're about to crap yourself every time you concentrate on the clones." Eye-twitching, Naruto performed a rude hand gesture to the towering tailed beast and left his mindscape, Kurama's rumbling laughter following him. Naruto gathered up his backpack and headed out of the field towards the Hokage Tower, all the while muttering about smart aleck foxes. Naruto had grown a bit over the past 4 years, though he ultimately looked similar to how he did when he was 8. Though there was something different about him. Instead of the standard t-shirt and shorts he had in his childhood, he wore a burnt orange jumpsuit with black trimming, a red spiral proudly on the back, Shippuden outfit. Originally Naruto had been planning on a lighter orange color, but Kurama pointed out to him that darker colors would work better when he was dodging the village's ninja after a successful prank. Also, the outfit the preteen chose was closer in color to Kurama's fur, which was in his own words, the best freaking color out there. A lot had happened over the years at the academy. He'd made friends with most of the top 8 people in his class, though the one girl who was in rank for number 1 Kunoichi, Sakura Haruno, still didn't speak to him much for some reason, and he'd even gotten some of the more stoic kids, Sasuke and Shino, to open up a bit more. While still reserved people, they were at least able to get into decent conversation now, and Naruto swore that he'd even made them smile once or twice. His grades in the academy were about average. While he could probably do a bit better in class, Naruto found that it was still as boring as when he joined and just couldn't put in his 100% on some assignments. That and his pranking reputation probably didn't help. The pranks. Thanks to his and Kurama's creative genius, the villagers of the Leaf had been in a state of constant alert these last few years. From the standard stink bombs to elaborate wire traps involving orange paint, itching powder, and an entire beehive, the Umbu were still trying to figure out how he smuggled all that into their headquarters. He had gained the reputation of the village's prankster. Though he'd make sure never to take a prank too far, such as leaving permanent damage, the fact he was able to do so much to a village full of ninja, it was nothing short of impressive. Kurama was no help to the poor unfortunate souls of the Leaf, as he was always encouraging the boy to do more and more elaborate pranks, laughing all the while and fist-bumping with Naruto afterwards. So after 4 years, it was finally a week away from the final graduation exam at the academy. Naruto contemplated graduating earlier, as was an option for all students, but instead opted to graduate with his friends. I mean, which would he rather work with, older kids who he didn't know at all, or people his own age that he'd spent years with? So yeah, the choice was obvious to him. Now though, he was having trouble for the last jutsu necessary to pass. While the rest of the exam was to determine class ranking and who would be teamed with whom, the top 3 jutsus, replacement, transformation, and clone, were necessary to know in order to graduate unless there was a legitimate medical reason for not being able to do so. With practice, Naruto had the first 2 jutsu all but mastered. The last one, though, was just not coming to him. He'd worked with all his friends on it, even getting Hinata to monitor his chakra with her Byakugan while Kurama monitored from within the seal, yet still he couldn't produce so much as one clone without it looking like a corpse. Now here Naruto was, 12 years old, in front of the Hokage's office about to ask one of his favorite adults on a technique that might help him pass. Knocking, Naruto heard a come in and opened the door. Sitting at his desk, Hiruzen Sarutobi hadn't changed much over the years except maybe looking a bit older. The elderly leader smiled as his surrogate grandson walked in. "Well, hello there, Naruto. How are you this fine day? Are you excited and prepared for the graduation exam next week?" he asked. Naruto looked a bit sheepish at this and rubbed the back of his head. Actually, old man, that's kind of what I wanted to talk to you about." Intrigued, Sarutobi motioned for the boy to go on. Taking a breath, Naruto continued, "So, here's the thing. I've been working on the material needed to pass, and for the most part I've got the stuff in the bag. But for some reason I can't get the stupid clone jutsu to work. You see, I've asked all my friends and they all say I'm using too much chakra in the technique, but even at my lowest it's not working. So Kurama suggested I asked you if you might have any advice or techniques I could use?" He trailed off with a hopeful tone. The third gained a thoughtful look at that. While he was initially wary of having Naruto interacting with one of the tailed beasts, a supposed creature of malice, Hiruzen was eventually convinced that the chakra being's intentions were sincere and was actually a positive influence on the boy's life. There were several different options on what to do about Naruto's problem, and he believed he knew the best one. It is thanks to the blonde's work on chakra control and his large reserves that he was even considering teaching Naruto this technique. Normally, this jutsu was saved for those of Jonin level. Giving an encouraging smile to the whiskered preteen, the Hokage said, "I believe I know just what you're looking for, Naruto." The day of the final exam. "Naruto!" was a shout many a ninja was shouting as they chased a figure in orange over the streets of the Hidden Leaf. Why was Naruto being pursued, you may ask? The large amounts of graffiti covering the Hokage monument may have had something to do with that. While it may seem presumptuous to point the finger at Naruto, despite being the village prankster, there was actually a good reason they figured he was the culprit. The whisker marks that adorned the faces of each of the Hokages were kind of a big clue. Chasing the blonde up and down the streets, the pursuing ninja failed to notice when Naruto was able to hide himself behind a tarp disguised as the fence he stood in front of. Laughing along with the fox in his head, Naruto left his hiding place to walk down the street. Oh man, Kurama. The look on their faces was priceless, Naruto thought to the Nine Tails. Clutching his furry stomach while giving his deep rumbling laugh, Kurama wiped a stray tear from his eye with one of his tails as he agreed with his host. "And wait until they see the other pranks you were able to pull off at the same time with that new jutsu. They'll be wondering how you did that for years." Out loud, Naruto commented, "That was just too easy." "Oh yeah, Naruto?" A figure behind the boy shouted out, causing said boy to yelp and leap nearly 10 feet in the air. Whipping around, Naruto saw a fuming Irika behind him. Irika-sensei, what are you doing here?" Naruto stuttered out as his favorite teacher glared daggers at him. "I was looking for you, idiot. Class started an hour ago and then I hear you pulled this off." The teacher barked as he picked the boy up by the scruff of his jumpsuit and carried him off to the academy. "You will be cleaning this mess up after the exams are over, you understand?" Irika finished, to which the hanging boy meekly nodded. Ninja Academy. Today, many of you will be starting off on the next step of your journey to become ninjas of the hidden leaf. Irika explained to his class as he and Mizuki prepared the written portion of the exam. The journey ahead of you will be long and at times dangerous, but I'm confident each and every one of you will do the leaf proud. Naruto grinned as he looked over the exam. While written tests weren't his strong suit, he'd gone over the material enough to know most of the answers, and he had Kurama watching his back, or more precisely his mind, in case he messed up. After the hour was up and the papers were turned in, it was time for the ninjutsu portion of the exam. One by one the students were called, with Naruto giving each of his friends a nod of encouragement to which they all returned, though Hinata did look quite red when she went into the exam room. Naruto hoped that it wasn't her nerves about the exam. When his name was finally called, Naruto bounded into the exam room with a large grin. "Prepare to be blown away by my awesomeness," Naruto declared as he stood confidently in front of Irika and Mizuki. The two Chunin rolled their eyes at the blonde's antics, and Irika looked at him while saying, "All right, Naruto, it's time to do the 3 necessary jutsu. Are you ready?" Seeing his whiskered student nod, Irika continued, "The first thing we need to try is the replacement jutsu. You need to replace yourself with one of the logs along the back of the room when one of us dash." The scarred Chunin was cut off as Mizuki chucked a blunted kunai at the boy, who disappeared in a puff of smoke to be replaced by a log. The boy himself was along the back wall of the room. "Throws an object at you randomly," Irika finished, giving an approved nod at Naruto's reaction time. "Next is the transformation jutsu. Transform into the first thing you think of whenever you're ready." Naruto gave a mischievous grin at this that put both teachers on edge. Putting his hands together in the necessary sign, Naruto shouted out, "Transform!" and a puff of smoke once more surrounded the boy. However, when the smoke cleared, instead of Naruto or a log, there stood a gorgeous blonde woman who had her long hair pulled into pigtails and had cute whisker marks on both cheeks. It was then the Chunin noticed that besides the few wisps of smoke in key areas, the girl was entirely naked. Both Irika and Mizuki gave deep blushes as their eyes bulged out of their heads. This only lasted for a moment though, as both men were sent crashing into the opposite wall via the torrential nosebleed they both got. The blonde goddess disappeared in another puff of smoke to reveal a laughing Naruto, who was cracking up at the results of his self-made attack. The sexy jutsu. It was a technique both he and Kurama were able to come up with after watching how perverts, Jiraiya, acted around beautiful women. Inside the seal, Kurama was also rolling around in laughter at the prank his host just pulled, though there was something that confused the great fox. "Heh, I'm surprised that worked on Mizuki. I always thought he swung the other way." Hearing this, Naruto was almost blue in the face as another peal of laughter escaped him. After a minute or two, both teachers were able to pick themselves off the ground, curiously already having wads of tissue shoved up their nostrils. "Enough of your stupid jutsu," Irika roared in embarrassment as Mizuki sat down with a blush still on his face, though this was of humiliation. Giggling, Naruto was able to compose himself enough to do the transformation again, though this time of Irika. Giving a cough, the scarred Chunin said, "Now that's better. Finally, you have to do the clone jutsu and you'll be set." Sensei? I've been having trouble with the standard clones because I'm told I have too much chakra. So Old Man Hokage gave me an alternate version of the jutsu. Will that be okay?" Irika paused for a moment and looked at Mizuki, who just looked confused. "Well, if Lord Hokage allowed it, I don't see why not. Show us what you can do," he consented. Nodding, Naruto placed his hands into a cross seal and shouted, "Shadow Clone Jutsu." Yet again smoke filled the room, and once it cleared there were now 5 Narutos standing in the room. Though unlike normal clones, the shadow clones had an actual solid presence in the room. This display left the two teachers gaping. Getting a hold of himself, Irika commented, "Wow, I didn't see that coming." He then gave an encouraging smile to the blonde and continued, "That was amazing, Naruto. The shadow clones are usually reserved for high Chunin to Jonin rank, Yet you pulled it off flawlessly. You have more than earned to wear this. He pulled out a leaf forehead protector out of the box beside the table he sat at and held it out for the whiskered preteen. Congratulations! He finished with a huge grin on his face. All right, Naruto whooped as he jumped for his forehead protector, accidentally tackling Irika in the process. After embarrassingly apologizing, Naruto took off the goggles he wore on his forehead and tied the leaf symbol in its place. After the rest of the class got their headbands, we find Naruto sitting on the swing giving a mental chat with Kurama, having earlier given his congratulations to his friends as they went their own ways to celebrate. So absorbed was he with his conversation that Naruto was able to ignore some of the dirty looks a portion of the parents were shooting his way. Man, that was easy. I owe you, Kurama. Asking the old man was a great idea, Naruto thought to the Nine Tails. Meh, I'm sure you woulda come up with something else if I hadn't. You're my host after all, so you're bound to be awesome. Kurama complimented his host while boosting his own ego. Aren't you the humble one? Naruto teased his friend playfully before he noticed Kurama stiffen somewhat. What's wrong? He asked. The gray jerkweed is coming, Kurama growled as Naruto focused on the real world. Sure enough, Mizuki was approaching him with a smile on his face. Despite the negative vibes he was radiating, neither Naruto nor Kurama felt comfortable about the man. He seemed pleasant enough, but there was always that lingering feeling that he was hiding his true emotions to fool everybody else. Ah, good to see you haven't left yet, Naruto, Mizuki said in a cheerful voice. What's up, Mizuki-sensei? Naruto asked, internally cautious but remaining pleasant on the outside. Mizuki wasn't the only one who could act. First of all, I wanted to give you my congratulations on passing. Though the teachers have run into a slight snag, Mizuki explained. You see, after going over the numbers, you using the shadow clones and the good results of the rest of your test have given you a tied score with Sasuke. Normally this wouldn't be a problem, but since Sasuke is placed as the top student, your scoring makes team placements a little harder. So it was decided by the staff that each of you would be given an individual test and the one who scores the highest will get top student rank. We'll be able to work out team assignments from there. Naruto nodded while mentally frowning. While Mizuki's reasoning seemed sound, he still felt weary from all the negative feelings he was giving. Most of them seemed turned towards him while the rest were at the village in general. Deciding to play along, Naruto questioned, So what's the test? Internally smirking as his plans came together, Mizuki gave the demon brat his instructions, confident he'd be successful in both getting the Scroll of Seals and ridding the world of the Nine Tails once and for all. Time skip. Later that night. You sure you want to do this? Kurama asked Naruto as said boy quietly crept through the Hokage tower. Well, the way I see it, if Mizuki's telling the truth then no harm, no foul, Naruto thought as he sensed for any hidden umbu. And if Mizuki wasn't on the up and up, I've got a backup plan just in case. If you're sure, Kurama grunted as he settled down to watch the show through Naruto's eyes. Once they reached the room that held the scrolls, the two couldn't help but admire the sheer size of the place. Unfortunately, their awe cost them their focus, so they didn't notice the presence behind them. What are you doing in my home at the middle of the night? An old yet firm voice asked behind Naruto, causing him to yelp and spin around only to see the third standing behind him. Oh crap, Plan B, Naruto thought in a panic as he quickly gathered the necessary chakra. Transform, he yelled. GH. Scene skip. Forest. I honestly can't believe that worked, Kurama said in a deadpan as his left eye twitched. I know what you mean. Who knew the old man was a pervert? Naruto asked aloud, since there was no one around to see him talking to his imaginary friend. Now let's see, Naruto mused as he opened up the scroll and taking a look at its contents. Oh look, they've got the shadow clones in here, Naruto pointed out with an interested hum. After a moment or two, Naruto called out, Ah, this'll work. Taking a peek at what his host was looking at, Kurama gave a rumbling chuckle. Oh yeah, I can see you working with that. It was a few hours of practicing later when Naruto was lying on the ground panting heavily with a satisfied grin on his face. "Nailed it," he declared. "I've finally found you," an irritated voice commented in front of him. Looking up, Naruto found an annoyed-looking Iruka standing over him. "Oh hey Iruka-sensei, what are you doing here?" Naruto asked as he got up onto his feet. What am I doing here? Is that all you've got to say for yourself?" Iruka yelled as he bopped Naruto over the head, causing him to find himself kissing dirt. "Ow, ow, ow," Naruto whined as he nursed the swelling bump on his head. Looking up at the seething instructor, Naruto asked, "Hey, what gives? I do this stupid bonus exam and this is the thanks I get." Iruka gained a confused look on his face. "Bonus exam? What are you talking about?" "I totally called it," Kurama stated within the seal, while Naruto gained a more alert pose while trying to keep his cool. "What you mean, sensei? Mizuki-sensei told me that the academy needed me to take the scroll in the Hokage Tower and learn a jutsu from it for them to help with the team placement?" he asked before he suddenly felt a large burst of negative emotions coming from the trees above them. Before he could react, the whiskered boy was roughly shoved to the side as the sound of multiple sharp objects slicing through the air assaulted his ears. Getting up, Naruto looked in shock as Iruka was pinned to the side of the shed in the clearing they were in by a multitude of kunai and shuriken. Fortunately, none of them were in fatal areas, but it would still be extremely painful to experience. Looking up, Naruto saw Mizuki crouched in the tree above the two dressed in stealth gear and with two massive shurikens strapped to his back. Hearing a cough, Naruto turned to Iruka, who was glaring up at Mizuki while he took the knives out of his arms and legs. "So that's how it is," the scarred teacher grunted. Mizuki, a look of urgency on his face, called out to Naruto, "Naruto, give me the scroll. Iruka's after it and he'll kill you to get it." "Like we'd believe that," Kurama said flatly, not believing how gullible Mizuki thought his host was. While the one lie was somewhat believable, that one was clearly thrown together on the fly. "Let's play along for now, see how this goes," Naruto advised mentally while putting on an act of being confused. "Don't listen to him, Naruto," Iruka shouted out at the boy, struggling to move through the pain. "That scroll contains village secrets. You need to get out of here now and defend that scroll with your life." Seeing that Naruto seemed to be hesitating, and that Iruka was for all intents and purposes out of commission, Mizuki figured he could drop the act. Sighing before gaining a wide, insane grin, Mizuki said, "Oh well, it was fun while it lasted." Before pulling one of the giant shuriken off his back, "Hey Naruto," he called, getting the boy's attention. "Do you want to know why the villagers hate you?" Knowing where the traitor was going with this, Kurama couldn't help but groan. "Oh, you've got to be freaking kidding me." Iruka also knew where the other Chunin was going with this and yelled out, "No, you mustn't tell him, Mizuki. The law." Deciding to play along to lower Mizuki's guard, Naruto gave a confused look and asked, "What are you talking about? What law?" Mizuki's grin was downright demonic at this point as he continued, "Do you know what happened 13 years ago?" Mizuki cut in. Naruto, though knowing where the sudden change in subject was going, answered with a trembling voice, "Oh, of course I know what happened. The Kyuubi attacked and was killed by the fourth, but what does dash?" He was again cut off by the shuriken-wielding Chunin. "The Kyuubi was never killed," Mizuki spoke, while inside the seal Kurama pulled a face that screamed, "No duh." That night, the fourth chose a newly born infant to seal the demon into. "Do you want to know who he chose?" he asked, grinning wickedly, staring into Naruto's ocean blue eyes. "He chose you. You are the nine-tailed fox, the demon that ravaged this village and stole Iruka's parents away," he shouted. Naruto was stunned, but not for the reason Mizuki thought he was. He looked over to where his favorite teacher stood and felt a wave of guilt run through him. While knowing it was neither his nor Kurama's fault on what happened that night, the knowledge that his best friend hurt his teacher in such a way, albeit against his will, stung the blonde. Kurama meanwhile dropped his head in shame, wondering just what his past self had been thinking at the time. At the same time, though, Kurama couldn't help but marvel at the gray Chunin's stupidity. If by some chance Naruto and Kurama were the same person, what on earth made Mizuki think trying to trick and anger him would be a good idea? If I'm ever out of this seal, Kurama muttered darkly, this guy had better watch his back. Mizuki, seeing the blonde was distracted, gave another wicked grin as he prepared to throw his shuriken. Now you can just die, demon spawn, he shouted as he threw the spinning blade. Naruto was able to snap out of his trance in time to notice the blade coming for him. Oh crap, was all he could think before he was once again knocked to the ground. Looking up, Naruto was shocked to see Iruka crouched protectively over him, the large shuriken lodged in his back. Are you all right, Naruto? He asked shakily, some stray blood from the corner of his mouth dripping onto Naruto's whiskered cheek. Why? Naruto asked weakly. While he knew he was innocent, seeing Iruka risk himself like that for the supposed killer of his parents really made him confused. Giving a shaky breath, Iruka explained, my parents, after they died, there was nobody to compliment or acknowledge me. I always acted like an idiot, just to get people's attention. Since I wasn't all that good at academics, it was better than being nothing, so I kept acting like an idiot. It was so painful. Naruto, you must also be in a lot of pain. I'm sorry I wasn't able to look out for you more. Before he could continue, however, Iruka felt a hand being placed over his mouth in a silencing gesture. He gave a quizzical look at Naruto, whose eyes were shadowed by his blonde locks, but a wavering smile was on his face. Don't be sorry, Iruka-sensei. You did a great job in watching out for me when you can. So let me watch out for you now. Okay. Naruto gently got out from under the wounded teacher, who watched him in surprise. Naruto stood up and faced Mizuki, his eyes still shadowed by his hair. Mizuki sneered down at the blonde. Oh, you got something to say to me, brat? Well, make it quick so I can kill you and be on my way. Shut up, Naruto said in a whisper before he fully looked up at Mizuki, his eyes holding a righteous fury. If you so much as lay one more hand on Iruka-sensei, I'll kill you, he growled while focusing some of Kurama's powerful chakra into his veins, turning his eyes slit but not red. Still, the killing intent coming off the blonde was enough to get Mizuki to take an involuntary step back, before he regained his bravado and gave a maniacal laugh. Ha! You are going to kill me? I'd love to see you try. I'll kill you in one move, Mizuki boasted while he took his remaining shuriken off his back and took a ready stance. Just try it. I'll turn anything you throw at me back 1,000 times over, Naruto shouted out while doing a familiar hand seal. Shadow Clone Jutsu, Naruto shouted as the clearing was filled with smoke. When the smoke cleared, a small army of Naruto clones filled the area. Mizuki, however, just scoffed. PFT. If I was just seeing this, I might be surprised enough for you to take me down. As it is, however, 1,000 times nothing is still nothing. He roared as he hurled his shuriken like a boomerang, taking out a dozen of the shadow clones before it returned to his hands. Naruto, instead of looking worried, just grinned. Hey Mizuki, he called out as he and his clones each got out one shuriken each. Did you know in that scroll you gave me it contains the Shadow Clone Jutsu? Well, right under that is this super cool jutsu I made sure to learn before you came. Shall we show him, boys? He asked, addressing his clones. Heck yeah! They all shouted as they all threw their shuriken at the traitorous Chunin. Heh! Is that supposed to impress me? I can easily dodge dash. Mizuki started before Naruto and his clones all cried out in unison, Shuriken Shadow Clone Jutsu. Where once was about 100 shuriken now flew thousands, blackening the starlit sky with their numbers. Mizuki paled at the sheer number of weapons coming at him. Oh fu dash! He screamed before the weapons reached him. There was black rain for a moment before the last shuriken fell to the ground. Iruka, staring wide-eyed at the display, found his voice a moment later. Did you kill him? He asked hesitantly, unsure of how anyone could survive such an onslaught. Naruto and his clones turned to the wounded Chunin and gave matching cheesy grins and a thumbs up before the clones, both of the blonde and of the shuriken, went up in puffs of smoke to reveal an out-cold but very much alive Mizuki, who lay pinned to the ground by about a single shuriken, the real Naruto's. The man was blue in the face and foaming at the mouth, but no visible wound was on him. Iruka stared at the scene before laughing incredulously. Naruto had made it seem like the shuriken were aimed for Mizuki, but in reality only the real one was truly aimed for him, the rest were shot at the ground. It was Mizuki's panic and fear that caused him to pass out. All in all, a beautiful prank. As expected of the Leaf's #1 most unpredictable prankster. Naruto, with the help of a shadow clone, was able to lift the injured Iruka up onto his feet and started to carry him back to the village, while a third clone carried the scroll and a fourth one carried a still-out cold and tied-up Mizuki. "Do you think you'll be okay, sensei?" Naruto asked as he stared at the wounds in worry. Iruka just waved it off. "Oh, I'm sure I'll be fine once the medic neens take a look at me. In the meantime, you'd better stick close to me until we get this whole mess sorted out," he stated, slightly surprised that the Umbu haven't stumbled upon them yet. Naruto, however, gave a giggle at this. Seeing his teacher's confused look, Naruto elaborated, "Oh, you don't need to worry about that, sensei. Before I left with the scroll, I made sure to leave a note for the old man explaining why I was taking it. That way, if Mizuki was tricking me, he'd have the Umbu on him faster than an Akamichi on barbecue," he finished with a triumphant grin. Iruka seemed surprised at that. "So, you were expecting Mizuki to trick you?" he asked. Naruto gave an affirmative nod. "Kinda, yeah. While his reasoning for me taking the scroll was good, I felt there were a few too many blanks that weren't getting filled out. So I figured that, since Mizuki never said not to, I'd leave the old man a note on why the scroll was missing." Iruka could only chuckle at his student's forethought. While seeming to be a hopeless idiot at times, Naruto truly did have a good head on his shoulders. Similar to Shikamaru, Iruka felt Naruto held back some of his potential in class. "So Iruka-sensei, about the fox?" Naruto started, not sure how to proceed. Iruka gave the blonde a gentle smile. "Don't worry too much about it, Naruto. While I'm sorry you found out the way you did, there is something you need to hear. While I might hate the fox," Kurama bristled a little at that, but let it slide, "I don't hate you. I've acknowledged you as one of my excellent students. You may not be the hardest worker, and can be clumsy and not everyone accepts you, but you already knows what it is to feel pain inside your heart. You aren't the monster fox. You are a member of the hidden leaf. You're Naruto Uzumaki." Naruto was silent for a few moments and Iruka noticed his head was bowed and his shoulders were shaking a little. "Naruto dash?" he started to say before he was tackled by an orange blur. "Iruka-sensei!" the blonde cried in joy as tears of happiness ran down his face. Naruto hugged onto one of his most precious people as he continued to sob in happiness. "Ow! Hey! Cut it out, Naruto. I'm injured here," Iruka admonished the blonde, though it wasn't with any malice, as he both laughed and cringed in pain. It was the start of a brand new chapter into the life of Naruto Uzumaki. Chapter 7. Both Naruto and Kurama were beating their heads repeatedly on a hard surface in tandem. The reason? Naruto's new sensei was agonizingly late. It was a few days after he passed the final exam and the incident with Mizuki, and team assignments were today. Naruto was on Team 7, which also consisted of Sasuke Uchiha and Sakura Haruno. It wasn't so bad, though Sakura did still tend to avoid talking to him and Sasuke was spending his time glaring intently out the classroom window, as if the outside was mocking him. His other friends had passed as well and were picked up by their respective senseis over an hour ago, leaving the three newly minted genin in the room alone. Finally, something cracked in the hyperactive blonde. "Ayer Gergaf, where the heck is our sensei?" he shouted while gripping his hair in frustration. Though also annoyed by their new teacher's lateness, Sakura admonished him, "Naruto, calm down. I'm sure there's a good reason our sensei's a little late." "Late? Late? 5, 10, 20 minutes is around the range of late. According to the clock, Naruto made an exaggerated look at the clock on the wall before turning back to his two teammates. He's missing. Humph. And what do you propose we do about it, Dobe? Sasuke asked sarcastically while momentarily turning away from his brooding. It was a nickname that Sasuke had come up with Naruto a couple years ago due to the whiskered child's class clown behavior. Naruto's nickname was no less affectionate. Naruto grinned and said, "Just watch and see, ya jerk." To this, Naruto pulled out one of the scrolls he had in his weapons pouch marked pranks and slid it open. "So, what do you think the penalty for our new sensei should be, Kurama?" Naruto mentally asked his towering friend. The long-eared fox pondered it for a moment, tapping a clawed finger against his chin, before adopting a wicked grin. "How's about treating him to a nice round of kickball?" he suggested. Naruto gained a matching grin and commented, "You sure? Usually that's our last resort prank." "Positive. Even if this guy has a good excuse for not arriving on time, that doesn't mean he couldn't have sent a messenger to let us know he'd be late. It sets a bad example for us young and impressionable types." The two snickered at the last comment before the fox continued, "Besides, Kickball will send him a message not to do it again ever." Naruto smirked. "Kickball it is then," before getting to work on his prank. "Naruto, what are you doing?" Sakura asked while looking at her new teammate suspiciously. "Oh, just showing our new sensei our displeasure for his absence." Naruto grinned back. "You're so immature, you moron. Whatever, just keep me out of it," Sakura snapped before going back to gushing over Sasuke. Naruto merely shrugged his shoulders and went back to setting up his trap before going back to his seat while trying to contain his laughter. It was nearly a half-hour later when they heard the door open. Their new sensei was a tall man with gravity-defying silver hair, his headband slanted over his left eye, and a black face mask covering the lower portion of his face. The rest of his attire was a standard Jonin outfit complete with flak jacket. The man stared at them all lazily for a second before saying, "My first impression of you guys is dash. OF." The man's eye went comically wide and white as the steel-toed boot that was tied to a pendulum above the door swung down and showed the meaning of the kickball prank. "I hate you," the man said in his new falsetto voice before collapsing onto the ground in a fetal position while cupping his damaged goods. Naruto and Kurama were howling with laughter at the man's misfortune while Sasuke looked at the man in disappointment for not being able to dodge the juvenile prank, and Sakura was trying to apologize to the man while internally she was laughing just as hard as the Jinchuriki and his bijou. After 10 minutes, the man was able to finally stand back up in a bow-legged position while glaring at his new students. That was a low blow. Credit to this prank goes to the Bernie Mac show, he finally said in his normal voice before straightening up and saying in his previous bored tone, "Meet me on the roof." He then proceeded to vanish in a swirl of leaves. The group of 4 plus 1 unseen fifth met up on the roof a few minutes later, and the silver-haired man looked at them all impassively. "All right then, my cute little genin, how's about we introduce ourselves?" he asked after a moment. "What did y'all like to know, sensei?" Naruto asked. "Oh, nothing much. Just likes, dislikes, hobbies, dreams for the future, stuff like that." "Why don't you give us an example, sensei?" Sakura suggested. Giving a nonchalant shrug, the man said, "All right. My name's Kakashi Hatake. My likes and dislikes are none of your business. Dreams for the future, I have a few hobbies." All we learned was his name. The 3 genins sweat dropped. Kurama was more vocal. What kind of half-baked introduction was that? Stupid, lazy cyclopes. The now-named Kakashi pointed at Naruto and said, "Okay, Mr. Funny Man, why not you go next?" Smiling, Naruto said, "Well, my name's Naruto Uzumaki. My likes are ramen, my friends, foxes, and the people who support me. My dislikes are the 3 minutes it takes to cook instant ramen and people who look down on me, my friends, or my dream. As for hobbies, I guess playing pranks and learning cool new things. As for my dream," at this Naruto straightened up more and gained a confident look, "I'm going to be the best Hokage the village has ever seen." and I plan on helping my friends out along the way. Well, he's turned out interesting, Kakashi thought before nodding his head towards Sakura and saying, "All right, how's about you, Pinky?" Looking slightly put off by the nickname, Sakura started, "Well, my name's Sakura Haruno. My likes." She looked at Sasuke and giggled while blushing. "My hobbies." Q giggle and blush. "And my dreams." At this she added in a squeal, not noticing Sasuke roll his eyes at the attitude. "Okay, and your dislikes?" Kakashi deadpanned. "Ino pig and immature idiots like Naruto," she stated firmly. "Ouch! Ouch!" Both Naruto and Kurama thought at the harsh dismissal. Alright, and how's about dark and broody over there?" Kakashi continued in the same bored tone. Sasuke sighed and looked up at the man. "My name is Sasuke Uchiha. I hate a lot of things, and I don't particularly like anything save those I can actually tolerate. What I have is not a dream because I will make it a reality. I'm going to restore my clan and kill a certain someone." "So cool," Sakura gushed. "As I suspected," Kakashi thought sullenly. "Geez, way to lay it on thick, Sasuke." Naruto sweat dropped. "I know, right? If he really wants those fangirls to stop hounding him, he's really got to stop giving the whole dark, dangerous, and mysterious vibe," Kurama noted. Kakashi squinted his visible eye up into what could be considered a smile and said, "Well, now that introductions are out of the way, let's get down to business, shall we? Tomorrow, meet at Training Ground 7 at 7 a.m. for survival training." The trio looked confused, so he explained, "There's one last test you have to pass to see if you'll be genin of the village, and I'll be giving it to you tomorrow." "Then what was the point of the test we passed here?" Naruto asked, annoyed. "That was just to see if you had the ability to be useful and weed out the hopeless cases. This test will see if you have what it takes to be genin. Just so you know, this test has a 66% failure rate, meaning out of the 8 teams formed this year, it's likely only 1 or 2 will pass at best. If you fail, you'll be sent back here for another year before getting to try again." This got all the genin hopefuls to pale, yet gained a determined look in both Sasuke and Naruto. "Now, remember to be at the grounds at 7 a.m. tomorrow. Oh, I'd recommend not having breakfast either, you'll just puke it up." He then vanished once more in a swirl of leaves, leaving the 3 on the roof alone. Naruto got up and stretched before saying, "Well, that was fun. I'm gonna get some last-minute training in before tomorrow. Either of you 2 care to join me?" Might as well. Better to have a target that hits back." Sasuke smirked, but Sakura shook her head. "Sorry, can't. I need to go home and tell my parents about our teams," she said before heading off, while Naruto and Sasuke went towards the training grounds in preparation for tomorrow. Time skip. "Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Isn't that how it goes?" Kurama sighed in a bored tone the next day as it neared 10 a.m. and Kakashi was nowhere in sight. "Oh, shut up," Naruto grumbled along with his empty stomach. He'd followed his new sensei's instructions to the letter, and this is how he's repaid? If I'd have thought I would have brought my prank supplies again, but no, instead I brought all my survival gear for this. This sucks. "Where is he?" Sakura grumbled, looking just as tired and hungry as Naruto felt. "Humph," was Sasuke's reply. Suddenly there was a swirl of leaves and Kakashi appeared in the clearing. "Yo," he said casually. Leaping to his feet, Naruto yelled, "Where the heck were you, you jerk?" "Oh, I got lost on the road of life," Kakashi shrugged. "Okay, it's official. This guy's trying to tick us off," Kurama growled. Ignoring the death glares he was receiving from his genin, Kakashi walked over to the training posts and set an egg timer on top of the middle one. Turning towards the trio, Kakashi spoke, "This timer is set for noon. The objective until that time is to get one of these bells off me." He held up 2 small silver bells for emphasis at this. "Anyone who doesn't get a bell gets no lunch and will be tied to one of these stumps while I eat lunch in front of you." So that's why he told us not to eat breakfast. The genin thought glumly as their stomachs growled in unison. Man, he's good, Kurama muttered, impressed by the jonin's maneuvering. It was then Sakura noticed something. Sensei, there are only 2 bells? Ah, very good of you to notice that, Kakashi said while smiling with his eye once again before continuing. Yes, this means that one of you will get tied to the stump no matter what. Also, the one who's left at the end gets to repeat the academy for another year. What? Shouted the genin. Sad but true, Kakashi stated airily. Oh, and if any of you want to have a chance at getting one of these bells, I'd recommend coming at me with intent to kill. Oh, he's going to regret saying that, Kurama smirked from the seal. But sensei, isn't that a bit dangerous? Sakura asked nervously. Kakashi I smiled again and said, Oh, don't worry. I'm sure I can handle whatever you 3 come up with. Now, get ready and start. With that, the 3 ninja hopefuls leapt into the tree line surrounding the training field. Kakashi sat in what looked like a relaxed position, but the trained observer could tell that he was ready for anything. They all seemed to be well hidden now. Good, Kakashi observed while observing his team's hiding spots subtly. Suddenly, though, an orange blur leapt into the clearing in front of the silver-haired man to reveal a grinning Naruto. All right, Kakashi-sensei, you better get ready to take your lumps, Naruto cried out as he got ready to charge forward. You're a little different from the average genin, aren't you? Kakashi deadpanned before reaching for his weapon's pouch, causing Naruto to tense. However, instead of a weapon, Kakashi pulled out a book. Not just any book, but one with a bright orange cover and the title, Make Out Paradise. Naruto, after pulling himself out of his face plant, angrily pointed at his sensei and shouted, "HY, what's the big idea with the book, you pervert?" Ignoring the pervert part, Kakashi casually flipped the book open and said, "Well, I was getting to a really good scene and want to know how it turns out." Naruto nearly saw red at this clear dissing of his skills and nearly made a blind charge if it wasn't for the fox in his belly. Wait, Naruto, as much as I'd love for you to kick that pervert's smug prick face in, you gotta stick to the plan. Taking a calming breath, Naruto mentally grinned and said, "Thanks, Kurama." He then proceeded to make a cross-shaped hand seal and shouted, "Shadow Clone Jutsu." Several puffs of smoke filled the clearing and there was a small platoon of Naruto clones in the area. Kakashi briefly looked up and cocked an eyebrow before going back to his book, while the group let out a battle cry and started to charge. Lesson number 1. Taijutsu, Kakashi stated before he started ducking and dodging the strikes from the multitude of blondes. Every now and then he'd dispel one of the clones with what looked to be an almost careless strike. Soon, only a small group of the clones remained while Kakashi hadn't even looked up from his book. With ease, he was able to take out 2 more clones with a sweep of his leg before appearing behind the last Naruto in the area with his fingers in the tiger seal. "You shouldn't let your enemies get behind you," the Jonin said in a strange tone before he jabbed his fingers forward yelling, "Hidden Leaf Sacred Taijutsu, 1,000 years of death." With that, Kakashi's fingers went where no man's fingers should go on a small boy, causing the blonde to rocket into the air while screeching in pain while clutching his backside before he too disappeared in a puff of smoke. This caused Kakashi's eye to show surprise briefly, before looking strangely satisfied. So he was able to switch himself with a clone before the fight even began. He's far more clever than he let on. "I think I might actually have fun with this group," he commented before going off to look for his students. Earlier. "So, what do you guys think?" Naruto asked as he and his teammates watched Kakashi destroy the blonde's clones almost effortlessly. "Humph, the man's good despite his attitude. It's a good thing you decided to use your clones to evaluate him first," Sasuke grunted. "I'm wondering how we can beat him though? I mean, we're just genin while he's a jonin," Sakura muttered worriedly as the group of clones grew smaller and smaller. While she wasn't a big fan of her blonde teammate due to her parents warning her to be cautious around him and also the boy's juvenile antics, which she secretly found hilarious, Sakura was willing to admit the blonde was a decent strategist in real fights, and if Sasuke was willing to work with him, then the whiskered boy couldn't be all bad, right? Internally debating with Kurama for a few seconds, Naruto's face soon broke out into a wide grin as he turned to the other two. "Don't worry, guys. I've got a plan to get us all to pass and— What the crap?" he shouted as the last clone was destroyed by Kakashi's attack, and he got the memory backlash. Present. Kakashi was walking at a calm pace through the woods, looking to catch a glimpse at one of his students. It's been a while since I noticed any of them, so that most likely means one or more of them are planning on setting up an ambush. I wonder, will they be able to grasp the true meaning of this test? As he was walking, the one-eyed ninja passed through some tall grass when he heard a pink of a wire being snapped. Kakashi's eye widened as his danger senses kicked in, causing him to leap to the side in order to dodge the barrage of kunai that were suddenly sent his way. Once he landed, he had to dodge again to avoid a swinging log. Clever. They're using the foliage to their advantage to hide traps. But where dash? Just then, 5 Naruto clones leapt out of the leaves from the overhanging branches and managed to pin themselves to the surprised Jonin. One grabbed onto his back to weigh him down while the other 4 grabbed each of his limbs. Before Kakashi could comment or retaliate, Sasuke leapt out of the bushes in front of them going through hand seals. Taking a deep breath, Sasuke called out, "Fire style, fireball jutsu," and launched a massive fireball at the pinned Jonin. The blast connected and there was a large explosion. When the dust settled, the area Kakashi was at was clear save for scorched earth and an equally scorched log. "TCH substitution," Sasuke muttered as he kept his senses peeled for the man. There was the sound of lazy clapping heard through the area as Kakashi stepped out from behind another tree. "Congratulations, Sasuke, Naruto. You almost had me there," he said as he gave his one visible student a critical eye. "Though you ultimately weren't able to get a bell. Care to try again?" he asked, mentally preparing himself for either Sasuke or the still hidden Naruto to attack him. To his surprise, Sasuke smirked. "Actually, sensei, I think the test is over," the dark-haired boy stated. Cocking an eyebrow, Kakashi asked, "Oh, and what makes you think that?" Suddenly, he heard the jingle of bells behind him and, with a surprised look on the visible parts of his face, turned to see Naruto and Sakura standing behind him holding a bell each. "Well, this is surprising. Tell me, when were you able to get a hold of the bells without me noticing? I would have felt it if one of the Naruto clones tried to take them during their ambush, so?" With a grin, Sakura explained, "Well, sensei, we all figured that simply trying to grab the bells wouldn't work from you after seeing how you effortlessly handled Naruto's clones from earlier. So Naruto came up with the idea that when you were distracted by the clones leaping onto you, the one on your back would subtly attach a piece of ninja wire to the bells. Then, when Sasuke attacked with the fireball jutsu, we figured you'd manage a substitution jutsu easily, but in the process the bells would get yanked off by the wire and I'd pull them out of the way before the flames hit." Impressed, Kakashi nodded. "I see. And after yesterday's little surprise," he said while slightly wincing at the painful greeting he got, "am I correct in guessing that the trap was your idea as well, Naruto?" Sheepishly rubbing the back of his head, Naruto grinned. "Well, I did suggest that we'd set a trap to get you into position, but Sasuke and Sakura were the ones who suggested where to put them to lure you into the best place. That, and both of them helped me set them up as we waited for you." Satisfied, Kakashi was well pleased on how the 3 got down their teamwork so easily, despite the animosity Sakura showed towards Naruto yesterday. Just one more test before he decided to pass them. Well, that's all well and good, but who's the one to get tied to the stump and go back to the academy? I'm going to guess Sasuke, as he's the only one without a bell. "Shadow Clone Jutsu," Naruto called out, causing Kakashi to raise an eyebrow in curiosity as a second Naruto appeared before the clone tossed Sasuke the replica of the bell the original Naruto held that appeared with the clone. Naruto grinned. "Actually, sensei, you just said we needed to get one of the bells off you. You never said we couldn't make more of them." Kakashi I smiled again and said, "Well then, I guess I have no choice but to pass all of you. That was actually quite clever of you, Naruto. You were successfully able to look underneath the underneath. However, were any of you three able to grasp the true meaning of this test? Seeing the three looking slightly puzzled, Kakashi elaborated, "Let me put it this way. The greatest asset that any shinobi can use is teamwork." He emphasized, making the three genin go wide-eyed. While it might not have been intentional, you three have shown to be able to put your differences aside and come together when it counts. This is essential in the career of a shinobi, because those who break the rules are trash, but those who abandon their comrades are worse than trash. This is a saying to live by. Now, Kakashi, I smiled as the timer went off and he continued, "Why don't we all get some lunch, and then we can talk about training and missions?" The newly appointed Team 7 all gave wide grins and went with their new sensei to start their lives as ninja together. Chapter 8. This is Orange 1 and I'm in position. Roger, Orange 1, this is Pink 2 in position as well. Humph. Black 3 is in position. Alright team, this is Silver Leader. Do you have the target in sight? Yes? Then on my signal, use Capture Plan Delta. Roger. X3. Ready now. 30 minutes later. Oh Tora, my baby. Mommy's never going to let you out of her sight again. An enormous woman squealed as she attempted to smother the small cat with a ribbon tied around his ear. The woman was oblivious to the cat's skin turning blue and how it was struggling to break out of her death grip. Excellent work, Team 7. The Capture Tora mission was a complete success. The third Hokage congratulated as the woman left with her slowly dying cat. Depends on what you mean by success, Naruto muttered with a twitching eye as he was covered head to toe in crisscrossing scratch marks, obviously taking the brunt of Tora's escape attempts. Seriously, and I thought Matatabi could get grouchy sometimes during the month. 1. Of course, seeing what happens when you get caught. Can you really blame that cat for being difficult? Kurama mused from within the seal. It had been a month since Team 7 had officially become ninja of the Hidden Leaf, and while they worked fairly well together, the missions that were expected of them just plain sucks, in accordance with a certain blonde boy whose inner fox agrees with the sentiment. Instead of the missions he'd dreamt about, such as rescuing princesses or battling evil missing Nin, Naruto found himself doing simple chores that any civilian could have done just as easily as a ninja could. While he'd heard about what D-rank missions were like during his pre-academy research, Naruto had honestly been hoping they were underplaying it. Apparently not. It was almost, if not worse, for Kurama. He was a fox of action, too. Yet the things his container was doing was about as interesting as watching paint dry, which they sometimes had to do when painting houses and fences. It was getting to the point where Kurama would just sleep through the entire mission, leaving Naruto to deal with the boredom himself because, while he got along all right with his teammates, neither were big on conversing with him while on missions yet. Sasuke would just grunt while Sakura would simply fawn over his cool attitude. Back to the missions office, Hiruzen was going over some new missions the genin could take, which included weeding, groceries, and babysitting, when Naruto's already thin patience snapped. "Oh no, nah, I'm not doing another moment of those crappy chores you label as missions. I want to see some action, old man. Come on and give us a real mission," Naruto all but begged to the old leader. "Naruto, show some respect to the Hokage. These missions are important for building teamwork and gaining experience, you know." Irika, who was assisting the Hokage today, barked at his former student. Naruto meanwhile was ignoring him and seemed to be having a private conversation with himself. I had the miso ramen for dinner yesterday, so should I have the beef or shrimp today? Personally, I'd go for the chicken, but right now I think you'd better listen. 'Cause I think you're being yelled at right now," Kurama's voice toned in, causing Naruto to shift his focus back to reality. Noticing Irika was winding down on his lecturing tone, Naruto cut in. "Oh, come on, Irika-sensei. We've been doing nothing but D-ranks and teamwork exercises for a month straight now. Don't ya think we should try something a little hands-on now? I mean, we already accepted the responsibility of being ninjas of the leaf when we put these headbands on." He gestured to his headband for emphasis with his thumb before continuing. "So don't you think we deserve the chance to prove ourselves? Irika was about to say something, but the third beat him to the punch. Turning to the Jonin sensei, he asked, Kakashi, do you believe they are ready for the next level of difficulty? Kakashi looked up from his book and said in an even tone, well, I believe they're ready for a C-rank Lord Hokage. Giving a nod, Hiruzen said, well, it just so happens that we received a relatively simple escort mission today. Your team will be responsible for protecting a bridge builder as he makes his way home until he completes his bridge. Is this acceptable? With big grins, the members of Team 7 eagerly nodded their heads and the Hokage ordered, send in the bridge builder. An elderly-looking man walked into the room with a slightly drunken swagger, and Naruto nearly gagged at the strong smell of sake on the man. He looked at the team blearily before turning to the Hokage and saying, what's this? I ordered a team of ninja to guard me and you send a group of preteens? They look like they couldn't guard a piggy bank, let alone me. Especially the short, goofy-looking one. I wonder who the short, goofy-looking one is? Naruto mused before noticing that both Sasuke and Sakura were purposely standing closer to him to show that he stood an inch or two shorter than them. Oh, that's gotta hurt, huh? Ya midget. Kurama chuckled in the blonde's mind. One of his personal favorite ways of getting under his friend's skin was constantly reminding them of their height difference. Naruto, meanwhile, was looking close to murdering the drunk, but Kakashi lightly restrained him. Now, Naruto, we can't go killing the clients. Bad for business and all that, he chided playfully. Tazuna just snorted at the comedy act and said in a self-important voice, all right, listen up, you brats. My name is Tazuna the Super Bridge Builder, and I'll expect top protection on my way home to Wave. Yet me? Team 7 nodded glumly, figuring that it was ironic the first important mission they get winds up with a grumpy drunk. After getting their instructions to meet tomorrow morning with enough supplies to last a couple weeks, Naruto went to grab a quick bite to eat at Ichiraka Ramen, since it would be a while till he would be able to eat there. Once there, Naruto was pleasantly surprised to see Hinata, Kiba, and Shino there. Hey guys, what's up? Naruto greeted as he took a seat. Hello Naruto. We're doing fairly well. Kurenai-sensei finished training for the day and I suggested we eat lunch here. Hinata said while trying her best to avoid stuttering. Yep, place has got some pretty good ramen, I'll say. Kiba agreed while Shino just nodded. Sweet. So how's the team getting along? Naruto asked as he placed his order. It's all right, I guess. Sensei's been focusing on our teamwork and stuff while leaving the majority of our individual skills to our clans. Missions suck though, Kiba shrugged. Yeah, pretty close to the same with my team. We did get a chance to do a C rank though, so here's hoping things will get interesting soon. Naruto smirked, hoping to get a good reaction. He wasn't disappointed. Kiba spit take on his ramen while Hinata's eyes widened. Shino showed no real reaction save for the raising of his eyebrows, but it was enough to show he was also surprised. Hinata was the first to recover and said, Oh, congratulations Naruto. I am glad your team is ready for the next level of missions already. Blushing slightly at the praise, Naruto grinned and rubbed the back of his head bashfully. Oh, it's not that big of a deal. Alls it took was getting the old man to see my way, and now we get to guard this big-shot bridge builder, he boasted. You mean where you pouted like a 4-year-old and wound up having to babysit an old drunk? Kurama quipped with a huge smirk on his vulpine face, causing Naruto to mentally deflate. Shut up, Naruto grumbled before turning his attention back to Team 8. Wow, maybe we should talk to Sensei and see if she can manage to get us a C rank, Kiba mused while Shino silently nodded his head. The rest of the meal was spent talking about training and griping on the D rank missions. When the group got ready to leave, Naruto pounded fists with the two boys while giving a quick hug to Hinata, causing her to invent a new shade of red, but she was able to avoid fainting to her relief, and headed home while planning on how to get ready for the mission. Time skip. Next day. Team 7 met with Tazuna at the gates of Konoha at around 8 in the morning, including Kakashi, to which the genin nearly had a heart attack as he actually showed up on time, and got ready to head out to Wave. Before leaving though, Naruto stopped to stare at the gates of the village for a few moments longer. What are you waiting for, Naruto? Hurry it up, Sakura called to her blonde teammate. Turning back, Naruto said, "Oh, sorry. It's just that this is my first time out of the village. Guess I can't help but realize what a huge step it is for me." Accepting that, the group continued on. "So Kurama, anything you remember from the outside world before you woke up in the seal?" Naruto mentally asked his friend. "To be perfectly honest, I didn't get to see much before my memories stop. Besides, with how much time has passed, I don't think there's too much that I'd remember that would have remained the same," Kurama said in a slightly melancholy voice. Naruto then felt him tense before growling. "Though I'm pretty sure there weren't puddles on an otherwise dry road. Neither do I remember them leaking killing intent." Naruto blinked before noticing that there was indeed a puddle in the middle of the road they were on. At first it would seem inconspicuous, but it had been a dry week and, if one were to stretch their senses, the puddle was indeed leaking killing intent. Naruto mentally braced himself before risking a glance at his sensei. Despite looking to be completely relaxed, Naruto was able to pick up Kakashi's subtle body language enough to know he spotted the trap as well. Deciding to go along with it, Naruto did his best to look unaware of his surroundings, a task many would say came naturally to him dodge's Rasengan. Once the group passed the mystery puddle, the water suddenly warped and stretched into the figures of two somewhat short men, who wore long ragged cloaks and gas masks on their faces along with hidden mist headbands. The duo suddenly sprang forward at alarming speeds and circled around Kakashi, trapping him in a barbed chain that connected the matching clawed gauntlets each of the men wore. "One little piggy," one of the men sneered before they both pulled the chain taut, causing Kakashi's body to fall in large chunks. Before the stunned Team 7 could recover, the Mist Ninjas were already on the move trying to outflank Naruto. "Two little piggies," the second man rasped as they went in for the kill. Before they could land a blow, Naruto and Sasuke gained matching smirks. Without hesitation, Sasuke threw a kunai shuriken combo at the duo as the Naruto they were attacking went up in a puff of smoke, revealing it to be a shadow clone, and distracted the two enemy shinobi long enough that Sasuke's shuriken caught their chain and pinned it to a tree while the kunai added in extra force to nail the chain roughly to the tree in order to prevent the two from using it. While the two tugged fruitlessly at the chain for a split second, it was enough time for two more Narutos to leap out of the surrounding bushes and deliver wicked dropkicks to the backs of their skulls. Once the two Mist Ninjas tried to recover from the stunning blow, a larger shadow appeared behind the two and put them both in a headlock, effectively rendering them unconscious. The shadow revealed to be none other than an alive and well Kakashi, who was looking at his team with his patented eye smile. "Great work, team. It's not every day you see two fresh genin take out two B-ranked missing nin like the Demon Brothers here," Kakashi congratulated as he held each of the attempted assassins under both his arms. Once Sakura was able to calm her beating heart and restart her brain, she managed to stutter out, "Keika Kasha-sensei, you're alive." In response, Kakashi simply shrugged his head to where he was standing earlier to show a small pile of freshly cut timber, showing his escape was thanks to a well-placed substitution. Once she saw that, Sakura mentally deflated and said, "Oh, well, it's good to see you're all right, sensei, but I didn't really do all that much." Kakashi then said in a lecturing tone, "Not true, Sakura. While you were fairly startled by facing higher-level foes, that is the natural response for most people. However, you were still able to position your body in a protective stance in front of the client, which shows a great amount of willpower and determination." As Sakura blushed at the praise, Kakashi then turned to Tazuna with a much more serious expression. The bridge builder tried putting up an ignorant front, and failed miserably. The man was clearly sweating and fidgeting under the Jonin's scrutinizing gaze. Kakashi said in a light but dangerous tone, "So, Tazuna, would you please explain to me why someone sent missing nin after you?" Tazuna attempted to look affronted. "What do ya mean?" he asked. Pointing to the two unconscious assassins, Kakashi elaborated, "Those two are Chunin-level missing nin from the hidden mist named Gozu and Meizu, aka the Demon Brothers. While it was possible they were after my head, they should have left after they supposedly killed me, yet they tried to attack the rest of my team. Now, there are several possibilities to why this happened, but they seem to have been specifically waiting for us. That means they knew their true target, you, would be heading this way. Last chance. Why would someone hire missing Nin after you? Tazuna gulped nervously before relenting. All right, fine. I'm sorry about lying on the level of the mission, but it was the only way. Our village is too poor to afford anything higher than a C-rank request, and I knew having ninja bodyguards was the only way to make sure I wasn't killed. Who's out to kill you? Kakashi questioned. A bitter look crossed the bridge builder's face. You might have heard of him. He's a tyrant who goes by the name of Gato. Gato? Kakashi blinked. As in Gato from Gato Company, the billionaire? The very same, Tazuna confirmed. Except his business is just a front. The man's actually a crime lord who's involved in several illegal activities such as smuggling, and has taken over Wave as his base of operations. That's why my bridge is so important, because without needing ships to reach the mainland, Gato's hold on our country will weaken. Because of this, Gato has sent assassins after my head. Kakashi sighed and said, while I'm not unsympathetic to your problem, this goes way outside the mission parameters for a simple genin team to handle. We'll need to scrap the mission and head back to the village to dash. Sensei, his village can't afford to pay the fee. Naruto interrupted, drawing the group's attention to him. As ninja, we should always help when somebody deserving is in need. I don't want to just leave his village to that jerk Gato. Do you? I agree, Sasuke spoke up, causing the members of Team 7 some surprise as he wasn't much one for conversation. I say we help out, but only if the old man is straight with us from now on. I don't want any more unpleasant surprises. Sakura looked nervous for a moment before steeling her resolve and nodding. Besides Sensei, we already proved we can handle ourselves in a crisis situation. I feel like we're ready for this. Plus, it'll be a great way to see how skilled the team really is, Kurama mused to Naruto. Are you positive? Kakashi inquired. Remember, while these two might have been Chunin level, there will undoubtedly be more challenging opponents from here on out. I'd say this could even become an A-rank level mission. Are you still willing to continue the mission? The trio looked at each other before going back to Kakashi and giving an affirmative nod. Seeing this, Kakashi sighed and turned back to Tazuna, who was looking hopeful. All right, we'll continue the mission for now. But, at this, Kakashi's gaze turned steely. I expect full cooperation and disclosure from here on out. Am I clear? Tazuna gulped but nodded his head rapidly. Turning back to his team, Kakashi ordered, all right, tie these two up to be picked up later. Then, I want you to gather your stuff and be ready to head out in 10 minutes. Be on alert though, as the mission only gets harder from here. The trio agreed and got ready to embark on the first major challenge of their ninja career. Little did they know just how much the mission would impact them. Chapter 9. Team 7 was well on their way to Wave. Their guards up as they sat in the boat with their client, and the boat's driver was solemnly quiet. Suddenly the fog surrounding their tiny boat parted, showing a monolithic bridge that was halfway done. Wow, it's huge! Naruto exclaimed in excitement as he'd never seen a bridge so big. Heck, the biggest structure he'd ever encountered was the Hokage Monument, and that was just carvings in stone. Quite kid. Gato's men have patrols in these parts, that's why I'm not running the engine. The boat's driver hissed to the excitable blonde. Naruto quickly shut his trap with a sheepish expression while within the seal Kurama mused. Man, this Gato guy must really have these people by the throat for them to be this paranoid. Tazuna unknowingly confirmed Kurama's thoughts when he said, about a year ago, Gato set his sights on Wave Country and took control of the shipping industry through money and violence. He now has a monopoly on all business traffic in Wave, which is bleeding the people dry. Only the completion of the bridge stands in his way. Again, I'm sorry about lying to you about the scope of the mission. He gained a mischievous glint to his eyes that had all the Konoha ninja on edge. So if you quit the mission now, I will definitely be killed. But don't worry about it. If that happens, my cute little grandson will just cry for a few days and my daughter will curse all Leaf Ninja for the rest of her days. But it won't be your fault. Subtle, isn't he? Kurama deadpanned, which was matched by the shinobi at the obvious guilt trip. Kakashi awkwardly coughed and gave an eye smile. Well, I guess we haven't really got a choice now, do we? We'll protect you at least until you're safely back in your own country, he said as Tazuna turned around and flashed a silent victory sign. The boat trip continued in silence before they were brought to a desolate dock that was supposedly hidden from Gato's men. The driver wished them luck as he rode off, and the small party continued on their way. They came across a path that was overshadowed by woods on one side and a small lake rested on the other side of them. Suddenly, Naruto felt a stab of negative emotions coming from some of the nearby shrubbery and subtly pulled out a shuriken before tossing into the bushes with no warning. The rest of the group tensed at this, and Naruto went over to the bushes to see if he hit whoever was hiding in them. What they saw instead, however, was a small white rabbit in a surrender position with the shuriken lodged in the log right beside its head. The rabbit then fainted with foam coming from its mouth. "Naruto, you idiot. You almost gave us a heart attack and you almost killed that cute little bunny," Sakura scolded her teammate while punching him in the shoulder. "Ow!" Naruto yelped while mentally he was talking to his foxy friend. "What gives, Kurama? I know I sensed something negative from the bushes, but there's no way it was coming from the rabbit. Am I getting rusty or something?" "I doubt it," Kurama rumbled. "It's more likely that rabbit was used as a substitution. See its fur? That white color only happens in winter, but it's summer now. Which means..." There was a sudden stab of negative emotions behind the group, followed by the sound of rushing air, and both Naruto and Kakashi yelled at the same time, "Get down!" Team 7 hit the ground with Naruto pulling Tazuna with them just as a giant sword flew over their heads and embedded itself deeply in the tree behind them. Just then a deep, gravelly voice spoke out. "Well, no wonder the demon brothers failed. Kakashi of the Sharingan, I presume? It's an honor." The leaf ninja looked up to see a man was standing on the sword's hilt. He was a tall man with pale skin and short black hair, and he practically screamed intimidating. The man was shirtless, which showed off his extremely muscular body, had bandages wrapped around the lower half of his face similar to Kakashi's mask, and wore matching camouflage arm and leg warmers. On his forehead was a slanting headband with a metal plate that had the symbol for the hidden mist village carved into it. The ninja was staring at them all with a look that made the younger shinobi and one civilian shudder internally. The only one who didn't seem intimidated was Kakashi, but instead he had a serious expression in his eye as opposed to his normally aloof one. "Zabuza Momochi, the demon of the hidden mist." He addressed his opponent before reaching up one hand to his headband. "Everybody get back," the Jonin ordered. "This one is on a whole other level." "Heh, pulling out your famous Sharingan already? Glad you're taking me seriously. However, the old man is mine, so apologies, but you and the brats have to die," Zabuza remarked while tensing his body. "Surround Tazuna and protect him. Do not enter the fight," Kakashi commanded in a no-nonsense tone before lifting up his headband off his hidden eye, showing that it was red with 3 comma-shaped markings surrounding the pupil. "He's mine," he finished as he got into a ready stance. Inside the seal, Kurama tensed when he saw the Sharingan. "I don't know what it is, but something about that eye is making me uneasy," he muttered to himself as his hackles rose. "It reminds me of the old man's Rinnegan, but colder. I feel like I've seen it before though, but I can't remember where," he finished as he racked his brain trying to figure out where he'd seen eyes like that before, but coming up blank beside some half-forgotten nightmare. Meanwhile, in the real world, despite it being a potential combat position, the 2 Jonin-level ninjas decided to educate the group on what the Sharingan was and what it was capable of doing. Apparently, it was a bloodline of Sasuke's clan, the Uchiha, which raised the question of why Kakashi had one, that allowed the user to see through Tai Dash, Gen Dash, and Ninjutsu, as well as being able to copy an opponent's technique once it is seen. Then it was revealed by the missing ninja that Kakashi had an entry in the Hidden Mists bingo book, labeling him as the man who copied 1,000 jutsu. "That sounds hardcore," Naruto mused, seeing his sensei in a whole new light. "It's definitely surprising considering on how lazy he acts half the time," Kurama chimed in, deciding to worry about the feeling he had towards the Sharingan later. Zabuza crouched down and he seemed to be smirking under his bandages. Now, let's stop talking and get to the killing part, shall we? With near-inhuman levels of speed, the former mist ninja ripped his sword out of the tree and leapt to the nearby lake, standing on the water's surface in the lake's center. Ninja art, hidden mist jutsu, he declared after doing a series of hand seals. Suddenly, the fog in the area started to thicken at an alarming rate. The leaf ninja had zero visibility after only a few moments. Kakashi warned his team to be on their guard as Zabuza was famed for being a master of the silent killing technique, able to kill his opponent before they realized they were dead. Just then, a cold chuckle rang through the mist before Zabuza's voice started calling out mockingly on all the fatal targets on the human body and wondering which he should go after first. The area was soon flooded with a thick killing intent from the two Jonin's clashing wills. The feeling was nearly suffocating, but luckily for Naruto he had a source of comfort in his internal friend, who was able to dampen the worst of the effects by using his chakra to shield Naruto's mind the second he felt the killing intent spike. Sasuke, however, wasn't as fortunate and, due to his past trauma with his family, was almost brought to the breaking point from exposure to the potent intent. Thankfully, Kakashi was able to give him and his team words of insurance stating that he wouldn't let his comrades die. "We'll see about that." Zabuza's voice sounded from right in the middle of the team's formation. Startled, Naruto started channeling minute amounts of Kurama's chakra, enough to make his pupils become slit and sharpen his reflexes, and was able to turn in time to see Zabuza crouched in the middle of the group. Acting on both reflex and instinct, Naruto was able to bring his kunai up into a stabbing position, but before he could prepare either a defense or a counterattack, Kakashi was right beside him with his own kunai lodged in Zabuza's gut. Before they could even breathe a sigh of relief, another Zabuza appeared behind Kakashi, showing the one he was stabbing was a water clone. Using his heightened reflexes to his advantage, Naruto gave a warning shout to his sensei before throwing his own kunai at the attacking ninja. Unfortunately, Naruto's kunai was too slow, but the copy ninja was not. Just as the assassin seemed to bifurcate the silver-haired man, he too burst into a pool of water, showing him to also be a water clone. What occurred next was almost a cat and mouse game between the two, where one Jonin would seemingly kill their opponent only to show that it was a water clone, only for the reverse to happen to them. Eventually, however, Zabuza gained the upper hand and was able to land a strong kick into Kakashi's torso. This was actually a ploy, however, as Kakashi planted caltrops in order to slow the mist ninja down while he would use the opportunity to gain some distance in the lake and come up with a strategy. Zabuza was not so easily fooled though, and was able to get the drop on Kakashi and formed a prison made out of the water around the man, trapping him inside. No! Kakashi cursed his mistake as he'd been played into going into Zabuza's element. Heh! Now I can take care of you at my leisure. But first, Zabuza gloated before forming another water clone that started stalking towards the remainder of Team 7 and their charge. I'll take care of your brats. Before the genin could blink, Zabuza's clone was right in front of Naruto and sent him hurtling back with a devastating blow. Naruto! Sakura called out in worry of her blonde teammate. The force of the blow had forced Naruto's headband off and Zabuza stepped on it as Naruto rolled to a halt. Heh! The clone chuckled darkly. Just a bunch of brats wearing headbands and calling themselves ninja. A true ninja is someone who has lived through multiple life or death fights. Until you've reached that point, you're not even worth mentioning in the bingo book. Suddenly Kakashi shouted, "Take Tazuna and run away now." It was over the minute he caught me. But a water clone can't travel too far from the original, so if you flee now you might have a chance. Oh man, this is intense. Naruto thought in a panic as he tried to get to his feet. This is a real ninja. We're really gonna die. It was at this moment thought that Naruto saw his headband under Zabuza's foot. Seeing that symbol of his home reminded the boy of all he'd been working for since he was 4 years old. He remembered the people who have been encouraging him this entire time, even if everyone else thought he wasn't worth more than dirt. He thought of his friends from the academy, of Old Man Hokage, of Irika and Kakashi-sensei, of his team, and of his closest friend Kurama, who he promised they'd become legendary together. Remembering this, Naruto hardened his resolve. Kurama himself, who had remained largely quiet this whole time to see what his friend and host would decide, gave a proud smile as he could feel what Naruto would do. "That's the headstrong blonde that I know," Kurama mentally chuckled as he got ready to step in if things got hairy. "I won't run," Naruto thought with a sense of finality as he suddenly charged at the water clone. Ignoring the shouts of his teammates and sensei, Naruto got closer and closer before he was effortlessly batted aside by the clone. He was sent right by his team, and Sakura started berating him for his foolish actions on charging a hired killer. However, she stopped as she saw what the whiskered boy was clutching in his hand like his life depended on it. It was his headband. As Naruto stood up and tied the band back around his head, he asked mockingly, "Hey, how's life without eyebrows, freak?" Said eyebrowless freak had a vain pulse in his forehead at the jab as Naruto continued, "Put this in your bingo book. The man who will become Hokage, the Leaf Village Ninja Naruto Uzumaki." This show of bravado seemed to alleviate some of the worries from his teammates and client. Naruto then called over his shoulder to his Uchiha friend, "Sasuke, listen up. I've got a plan." Sasuke seemed surprised at this before smirking and scoffed, "Ancient, it's about time, idiot." Naruto matched his smirk and declared, "Now, let's get wild." Zabuza, while slightly impressed that the wet behind the ears genin were able to regain their courage, simply laughed. "Heh, a lot of arrogance, but can you back it up?" Kakashi seemed to have the same amount of skepticism as the missing Nin and screamed at his team, "What are you doing? It's our duty to protect Tazuna. Did you forget that?" However, Tazuna said that because it was his fault that they were in this mess, he wasn't going to say he wanted to live so much that he'd stop them so they should fight as much as they want. With that, Naruto and Sasuke stepped up to put their plan into action. But Zabuza didn't seem the least bit worried. In fact, he was laughing harder than ever. "Ha ha ha, going to keep playing ninja, huh? When I was your age, I had already dyed my hands red in my enemy's blood," Zabuza proclaimed ominously. "The demon Zabuza," Kakashi spat. "Ah, so you've heard of that, huh?" Zabuza said, amused. The genin were then told a disturbing story. Apparently, the hidden mist had earned the name Bloody Mist due to their now abolished tradition of having the current academy graduates fight each other to the death for their final test. The tradition was stopped after one child had killed the entire graduating class by himself. "Ah, good times. I had so much fun then," Zabuza smirked in remembrance with a deranged smile on his bandaged face. After psyching out the genin, Zabuza attacked. With terrifying speed and ferocity, Zabuza clotheslined Sasuke before delivering a hard punch right to the gut, sending him to the unforgiving dirt. The last Uchiha coughed up blood from the attack before Zabuza's clone placed his foot on his chest and reached for his sword. "Die," he simply said. "Crap," Naruto cursed before reacting quickly. "Multi-shadow clone jutsu." The mist assassin suddenly found himself surrounded by blonde kids. Zabuza seemed slightly intrigued by this. "Ho? That's quite a number of shadow clones." Before he could say another word, the clones suddenly dog-piled the man, giving Sasuke the opportunity to fall back. This didn't last long though, as Zabuza became a literal whirlwind of death, dispelling the shadow clones in the time it takes to blink. "But a pointless gesture," Zabuza finished. The real Naruto, who was thrown back by the force of the blow, quickly pulled out a large, collapsible shuriken from a scroll he was carrying as he flew. "Sasuke!" he yelled as he threw the blade to his comrade. Sasuke easily caught the blade in midair and smirked as he realized what his friend's plan was. Snapping open the blade, Sasuke threw it in a fluid motion towards the water clone while declaring, "Demon Wind Shuriken, Windmill of Shadows." The clone scoffed at the frontal assault, but was taken off guard when the bladed disc flew right past him, towards the real Zabuza. The stationary Zabuza seemed to gain an impressed smirk. "I see you only made it seem like you were aiming for my clone while I was the real target. A good strategy, but With that, he easily caught the blade with his free hand. It's still useless, he finished smugly. However, Zabuza noticed a second shuriken heading right for him that was hidden in the shadow of the first. Before it made contact, though, Zabuza simply leapt straight into the air over the shuriken while keeping his one arm still in the water prison. Still not enough, he taunted. Much to the shock of everyone present sans Sasuke, the dodged shuriken suddenly went up in a puff of smoke, and in its place was Naruto, his arm drawn back to throw a kunai at Zabuza's unprotected back as he fell. Giving a grunt as he threw the kunai, Naruto then went through a few quick hand seals before shouting, "Shuriken Shadow Clone Jutsu!" With another, though much larger, puff of smoke, the one kunai became over a dozen as they flew towards their target. Zabuza, seeing no other alternative, was forced to move away from his position at the water prison to avoid becoming a human pincushion. However, due to the number of kunai, 3 found their mark. One cut his cheek above the bandages, another embedded itself in his left forearm, while the last sliced one of his leg warmers open. Landing a few feet away, Zabuza turned to Naruto with murder in his eyes. Pulling out the one kunai with a hiss of pain, the Rouge Mist ninja charged at Naruto, spinning his stolen collapsible shuriken as he went. "Die, you little punk!" Zabuza roared as he closed in on Naruto. As he emerged from the water he landed in, there was a splash of blood, but it wasn't the Jinchurikis. A now freed Kakashi stood between the assassin and his student with him, using his own hand to stop the blade of the shuriken. Thanks to the metal plate on the back of his gloved hand, the blade did minimal damage. The silver-haired ninja then sent a glare Zabuza's way with both his normal and Sharingan eye, causing the swordsman to take an involuntary step back. "Great job, Naruto," Kakashi praised. "You guys have really grown up." Naruto chuckled bashfully as he gave a brief summary of his plan. The fox container had switched places with one of his clones when Zabuza was getting dogpiled, and had used the transformation jutsu on himself to become disguised as a demon wind shuriken. The clone then threw it to Sasuke, who caught on to the plan in an instant and threw both the disguised Naruto and a real shuriken to complete the plan's objective of freeing Kakashi. Zabuza just brushed it off as him getting distracted, but Kakashi rebuked him, saying he was forced to release the water prison, the 3 wounds being testament to his team skill. "I should warn you, I don't fall for the same jutsu twice," Kakashi threatened as the 2 broke contact, Zabuza giving a scoff at what he saw as a bluff. The 2 jonin began to trade blows again, but this time it was clear that Kakashi held the upper hand. For every move Zabuza made, Kakashi had a counter for it, and when the former Mist Ninja would cast a jutsu, Kakashi would use the same move almost the exact time Zabuza would launch his jutsu. In fact, as the battle progressed, it seemed like Kakashi was performing identical jutsu to Zabuza either right as he launched his or even a split second beforehand. This got the missing Nin seriously spooked, as soon Kakashi was even starting to say things that he was thinking, sometimes even before he thought it. Soon, his shaken nerves cost him as Kakashi was able to overpower the demon and pinned him to a tree with a barrage of kunai. Grunting in pain, Zabuza looked up to see Kakashi approach him, kunai drawn for the kill. "Can you see the future?" he asked the copy ninja fearfully. Kakashi, with his Sharingan seemingly spinning, answered, "Yes, and your future is death." Before the Leaf Jonin could land a killing blow, however, 2 metal needles suddenly stabbed right into Zabuza's neck, causing him to slump over. Team 7 exclaimed in shock at the sudden and unexpected kill before looking for the source of the needles. Just then a voice rang out almost coyly, "You were right, he did die." The group looked to the source of the voice and saw a somewhat small figure crouching from a nearby tree. The person's face was hidden by a white mask that had a red wave on it and the hidden mist symbol etched on the forehead, hiding their facial features. Besides that, the person had long, silky black hair that was partially tied up in a bun while 2 bangs hung free, and was wearing thick brown and green clothing that made the figure androgynous. The voice itself was difficult to tell whether it was male or female, but it was clear that the person was young, probably not much older than the assembled genin. "I didn't even sense this guy. Whoever this is, they were able to completely suppress any negative emotions. I didn't even know that was possible, Kurama announced with amazement. Either this person was a saint, or they were experts at hiding their emotions. Kakashi went over to check on Zabuza's body and, after checking his vitals, confirmed the man's death. The masked figure then said, "I thank you for the assistance. I've been tracking Zabuza for a while and have been looking for the opportunity to kill him." That mask. So you're a hidden Mist Hunter Nin? Kakashi deduced. Hunter Nin, that sounds familiar, Naruto thought while keeping a leery eye on the mysterious figure. I think it was mentioned in that one book we read on the different kinds of ninja each village has. Though if I'd hazard a guess, Hunter Nins do what their name implies and hunt down rouge elements. Kurama put his 2 Ryo in as the alleged Hunter Nin confirmed Kakashi's deduction. Turning to his students, Kakashi lectured, "This just goes to show that there are people in this world that are younger than you, but can be stronger than me." The Hunter Nin disappeared and reappeared next to Zabuza's corpse with a body flicker. "Your battle is over now. I must go and dispose of the body to remove any secrets it may possess. Farewell," the ninja said before disappearing once more in a body flicker. Kakashi pulled his headband over his Sharingan once again while giving a tired sigh. He then looked to his team and Tazuna before flashing his eye smile and asking, "Well, shall we move on?" He turned around, gave 2 steps, then collapsed to the ground with a groan. "Sensei!" The team shouted in surprise before going to check on their mentor. It looked as though he had collapsed in exhaustion and would need to be carried the rest of the way. Using the skills they learned in the academy, Naruto and Sasuke quickly made a homemade stretcher out of some tree branches and rope before hauling their sensei on it with Sakura keeping guard. The group then continued on their way to Wave.